welcome to Fiddler's Green podcast number 33, Finding Fellowship in Optimism. So I've kind of been away from the podcasting for the last few weeks, largely because I've been reconsidering the format. I have a different setup right now, you might notice, and I've been really trying to think about the best way I can serve the community and continue blogging in a productive way. So this is very strange because since Lent's begun, I've been off of Twitter. And usually most of the time when I do these podcasts, the most popular thing to talk about, the most popular thing I want to talk about is the latest beef on Twitter. But, this is the thing. I think really people online, I have noticed this, and I think everyone else has noticed this, there's been this wave of pessimism. There's been this wave of kind of dejection about the future. And I really think it's because we're in the early ages of the dead internet, where the internet's just being overwhelmed with a certain sense of fakeness and artificiality. And there's a hunger for authenticity and maturity, but nobody really knows how to produce it. No one really knows how to deliver it to people in a way that's believable or in a way that's interesting. And so I kind of wanted to talk about that a little bit today. I can tell you kind of just how I came about this topic idea. And, people can tell me what they think about how we want to schedule these podcasts in the future. I've been considering going to a format where I do them once every other week as opposed to every week, which might give me more room to talk about other projects or whatnot. But, not being on Twitter, you just kind of have this weird understanding of the online space. One of the channels I do follow on YouTube that kind of keeps me abreast of the things that are going on online is the channel iHypocrite. And, I don't know if I've actually ever talked to LP, the guy who runs the iHypocrite channel, but I know we've exchanged a few private messages and I feel like I know him. And I feel like his perspective is very, very level-headed and much more. I often feel like I have my head too far in the clouds to really be, useful when it comes to seeing things how the ordinary person sees them. And I think LP is very good at that. LP is very good at looking at the outside world and kind of perceiving it like a person with the correct values, but still, not necessarily so much into theory or intellect or the stuff that I usually talk about here would perceive them. So I always like tuning into the iHypocrite channel to see what's going on in the debate sphere, what's going on in the internets. And today I happened across I guess he's gone from being a part-timer like myself, having this as a side hustle, for this being his main income source. And so I guess that's kind of nice because it does allow him to produce a lot more content. And one of the content pieces he does produce is something called the Daily Cope, where he looks at online drama or online's going on. And this time he's doing some kind of expose on Destiny. And Destiny he's sort of the bread tuber that time forgot, because people forget, but Destiny was one of the primary sort of left-wing bloggers that brought down the enthusiastic explosion of right-wing content creation and internet blood sports that happened between 2017 and 2018. And the thing is that Destiny was the original debate bro. He was the original person that seemed like he had everything sorted out. And he was the person that manufactured the kind of frame game that would later become very, very popularly used by people like Vosh and even Mama and Xanderhall. This is the kind of always dodge out of the way of questions, reframe, and then repose the question in a way that subtly indicts the opposition. And Destiny was always odd. Well, not really very odd, but what was so odd about the Destiny phenomenon was that people thought for some strange reason that he had something actually useful to say. But it was really apparent to me from the outset that the guy would just say whatever he could say to win a debate. He would take on propositions so that he could win online debates and so that he could look smart. And what makes you look the most smart online? Well, that's to take the perspective of what the majority of sort of citation blurbs happen when you go on Google Scholar and you look for references to drop on people in a debate. if you can adopt the perspective of the mainstay of academia, of modern academia, you will be able to have a huge advantage in debates. And that was really Destiny's whole MO from 2017 to 2018 to 2019 to 2020, when now he's like one of the primary people on Twitch, I think. I guess he got banned off of Twitch. But no, he's a pretty big guy. And people still seem to think he's got something to say. But this week, iHypocrite, and I've only watched like about half an hour of this. Strangely enough, iHypocrite was watching a video where Destiny was talking to Richard Spencer. Now, Richard Spencer, this is another person I haven't heard of anything about him since 2018, when he sort of fell off the end of the earth. And I guess I don't know why. I don't care what either of these people have to say, but I was watching this iHypocrite live stream nonetheless, and kind of and kind of trying to figure out what the heck was going on, because these two guys were talking on some other host. I think that was called No Jumper or something like that, and all they're going on about. Now, Destiny is also looking really, really horrible. Like, he has blue hair now or something, and looks like he's gained about 10 pounds and just not looking in good shape at all. And they're talking about all these various things. And you ordinarily, oh my God, Richard Spencer and Destiny, you expect like a real knockdown, drag out debate of some kind, right? But instead, all they're going over is the issues of the day and why conspiracy theories are wrong. And the thesis that both of them are agreeing on is that every single problem we have right now is just an exaggeration. It's just information overload. Like our sensitive human brains just aren't capable of taking in all this information. And because of that, all we do is we look for the most negative framing, and then we superimpose that over the news. For instance, this whole train explosion in East Palestine, that wasn't a big deal. Train explosions happen all the time. Massive chemical spills happen all the time. But it's just because this one TikTok video went viral, and now everyone's worried about infrastructure decline and chemical spills. And South Africa, you might have heard that bad things are happening in South Africa. But, that's just because people are catastrophizing. That's just because people are blowing things out of proportion. And it goes down this, and what's so odd is that they're agreeing with each other. They're just, and iHypocrite pointed this out too. He was kind of shocked about how boring the conversation was, because all these guys were doing was just kind of affirming each other. It was very much in the pattern of something you'd see in academia, where people they make these propositions, and no one like, they're highly questionable propositions, but no one challenges them. They just let them float out into the ether, and maybe it's true and maybe it's not. And it gets to the point where they start complaining about everyone's favorite whipping boy, Conservative Incorporated. Now, of course, everyone on the distant right here hates Conservative Incorporated, and so on and so forth. But this time, it was interesting because Richard Spencer, of all people, had this whole monologue about how Scott Adams was trying to profiteer off of white oversensitivity about race. And so wait, what's going on? Is there a problem with the audio? I can see someone complaining about the audio here. Can people let me know in the chat if something's going wrong? Anyway, the I'm going to assume that everything's fine, so I can keep on going on. It was this bizarre parallax by which you could view what was once 2017 YouTube. And now it's kind of returned, and it's just these ghost forms of the old order. Richard Spencer and Destiny, the two people who were prominent attack dogs in 2017. Now they're brought on, and the only thing they have here to tell you is to just log off, brah. Just log off. Everything's fine. Everything's okay. Everything's just going the way it should go. Trust the experts. The only problem you really have is that your little human brain can't process what's going on in the outside world. And because of that, you're just getting all spun up on all sorts of things, and there's really no need to change anything. I don't know, and this is kind of, I guess, what I want to talk about. My talk today, and I guess I have been a little bit down this last month. People were commenting, "Oh man, you're really negative these days, Dave. You're really negative. You're too focused on all of the bad things in the world." And I think that there's a lot of reasons for optimism. I think there's a lot of things that we're building, and that are going on in the background. And I want to talk about some of them on the show today. But I think that the main thing is sort of a creeping realization from most people that the internet is just a very, very, very unhealthy place, and we have to come up with a fundamentally more healthy way of using it. We have to come up with a way that is not going to just completely destroy ourselves when we engage in this form. I think a lot about this when it comes to sort of Christian dialogues, especially. A lot of people in my circle constantly get into sort of heresy wars against their own denomination on Twitter. And I appreciate that, because nothing is not true if not the total betrayal of Christian leadership against their own congregations. You see this everywhere you look. You see this in the Catholic Church. You see this in a lot of Lutheran seminaries or Lutheran synods. I think that's what they call them. Colleges where they decide what is doctrine and what's not. I think it's a synod in terms of Lutheranism. You see this incredible inability or unwillingness to actually stand up for what's true, good, and beautiful. And the problem here is that the issue is generational. And this is a decision I made sort of very quickly on this channel, that I would absolutely shy away from kind of denominational or inter-Catholic knife fights over theology on this channel. I'll tell you my opinion. I'll go over why I think people are wrong, or why people are like Father James Martin are terribly misguided. But the problem is that when we engage on social media, there's sort of a fundamental asymmetry in how we deal with these things. The left, when it pursues some kind of political end inside an institution, it can go straight. It can swing for the bleachers. It can bring out a hatchet and they start hacking away at everything it thinks is offensive to its own sensibilities. But the right can't play this game. The right can't play this game because the right needs to use those institutions. If you start a big internecine theology fight inside your religious community, you're likely not going to have a religious community at the end of it, because the religious community relies on people of a previous generation to actually run it. And because of this, the right in particular are at a huge disadvantage when it comes to online discourse. And I think everyone's just trying to figure out how to actually manage this, how to actually take what we have built online and turn it into something that's useful or good for people in their own lives. And this has been a subject that I've talked a lot about in the previous ones. I'm going to go over some things here. I think that this is also why I've been pushing basket weaving more in our circles. So basket weaving is our attempt to take the online space and to move it more into real life. And a bunch of my friends have organized a new sort of organization to facilitate called the Beowulf Foundation, which is going to sort of be primarily focused on getting in real life organization up and going. But in the meantime, I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about managing people's engagement with the real world. In a lot of ways, I don't think we've ever overcome, obviously we haven't overcome the setbacks we've experienced during COVID. I did this poll, and this is sort of my impetus for moving in this direction channel-wise. I was curious to see just how many in real life friends, excluding family, do you have with whom you could comfortably discuss the political and cultural opinions that we ordinarily share online? And, I put this poll up a few times, and I get results that are very similar to this. So this is the first time I've run this poll, and what you really see is an enormous number of people just don't have any contacts with a real life person that they can actually engage with these ideas in real life, which means that functionally we are a completely online community. As far as this 20, and obviously this is Twitter, so it's going to be a little bit worse. I've done this poll in other contexts like basket weaving servers that are focused in real life events, and you get things that are much more skewed towards the fully offline 10 plus demographic. But but this is true for a lot of people. And I would say that if you were to do this, I would actually venture further. If you were to do this for radical left-wing circles or for far left circles, probably your online would be even higher. I would imagine that an enormous number of fans of Vosh or Xanderhol are just completely online people. They basically live online. They live in gaming communities. But this is not something that the right wing can afford to do. The right wing has to fundamentally be able to fix the problem with pessimism and fix the problem with atomization. Atomization benefits the left because atomization leads to politicization. And if you have a completely atomized community, you're going to have a massively progressivizing and degenerating community as well. And you can see here in this poll, I think you have like 36% that are 1 to 2 and 33% that are 3 to 7. And then only 8% that I would consider to be fully integrated, that their online views and their real life views are 100% integrated. And at 10 plus, I think that's really where things start to change. That's where you can say, okay, the person who I am online is basically the person who I am offline. And when I go online, I learn things, I learn information, I kind of get a better sense of myself, and I'm able to contextualize my person and my ideology with ideas that I could be experiencing from other people who live very far away from me. But the online isn't my real community. The online is simply an extension of my ideas and a way that I link the community I am building in real life to something that's greater and to something that's more substantial. It's only by crossing this threshold that I think we can get to the next level of what we want to do and the idea community we want to have. And you see, obviously, like I say, like, oh, I'm being very pessimistic, but there's green shoots everywhere. Obviously, there's the Old Glory Club that came out of the Soldings conference that we held last year, and there'll be another one this year, I think more in the summertime. There's numerous publications that have sprung up, especially I'm thinking most prominently recently of the Passage Press. There's new magazines, he had Curtis Yarvin shilling for his own set of acorns, as he calls them. And each of these organizations is a new opportunity to take your online ideology and make it something that's substantial, that's instantiated in the real world. And that's the only way it actually counts for anything, I would say. I was reading through the sort of basket weaving. We have a Discord server, and I think the link is in the description of this live stream if you want to actually look at it. I was going through the basket weaving server, and someone was saying to me, "Oh, I don't really watch your live streams anymore or your videos because I feel like I've absorbed all the information, and now I'm focused on community building." And, I obviously want you to read and watch my videos because I hope that I can be producing content that's useful to the community, right? That's useful to everyone out there listening. But this is not, that's actually a good step, right? If you've learned everything from me that you possibly can, and now you're ready to actually go build something of your own, that is actually a successful transition that we've accomplished, right? That's actually something that I would consider a victory, a substantial victory. And I don't really want people to be watching live streams if you're just watching me do another dunk on I don't know if I really dunk on Vosh, but let's say if you're watching me do another dunk on Richard Hanania or on Professor Matt McManus or Ben Burgess or something like that. What are the two people I always like to make fun of online when I was on Twitter before Lent? I don't know how useful is that, right? We know that these people have huge problems. We know that they're not going to be doing anything substantial. Obviously, the real $1 million question is, what are we going to be doing with this? Obviously, I would encourage everyone to be always building, always producing content, always reproducing art, always building things in your real life on the ground. But for the most part, for most people, the sign that you're actually building something are going to be real life contacts and real life trust networks. If it's true, and that this, especially with this AI stuff, and we always had to mention this, the AI stuff that we're saying kind of have a bit of an explosive moment in 2023. If these trends kind of solidify, as they probably will, what we're seeing right now is the beginning of what some people have called the dead internet, which is on the internet, everything is basically fake or a psyop, and it's incredibly easy to psyop yourself into negative emotions and unproductive avenues. And it's incredibly easy to get depressed and to get addicted to the internet, and it's very hard to take from something you find on the internet and actually make that useful to your own life. And so the question is, how do you kind of sidestep the dead internet? And I think the only way is to kind of come up with an alternative way of using the internet. The only way is to come up with an optimistic, forward way of using this as an information and networking tool and not as some kind of addictive substance. I've been thinking a lot about this. 12. I can't believe I wrote out 12 rules, but there's this thing about what is the right way to approach community building? And this is something that I think Alex Kashuda has talked a lot about recently. Jay Burden's talked a lot about recently. 2022 was sort of the year that we sort of took things into the real world in a big way. It was also, in many ways, paradoxically, the year where everyone online sort of spurred out and started turning on each other and getting into endless digressions and battles that never go anywhere and never lead to any fruitful thoughts. The most prominent one, and the one that's still ongoing, is the battle between Bronze Age pervert and the Tradcasts. I mentioned this battle so many times that I feel like rehashing it's almost kind of stupid and insulting to your guys' intelligence. There is absolutely nothing productive that comes out of this because first of all, the Bronze Age pervert, the BAP sphere, doesn't actually exist in the real world in any substantial way. And neither really does the pagan community for that matter. And the Catholic and Protestant communities, the Christian nationalist communities that are usually their target, while they are kind of more cucked and more clueless to a certain degree, and I don't really like the word cucked, but people are aware they have not quite come to terms with the challenges of modernity and the challenges of the post-internet age or the post-information age. And because of that, they're sort of hopelessly caught in these cycles and digressions and useless avenues, and they're very easy to make fun of. They nevertheless have some representation on the ground. But this kind of leads us to all sorts of weird habits. You have people organizing in online communities in ways that just aren't very conducive to actually building on the ground. And I thought that maybe the best way to kind of talk about fellowship building, because I really think that the path towards optimism begins with fellowship building, is to kind of take a look at the Pythonic ways of community building. And so this is a variation on something called Pythonic. Python is the most popular programming language online in particular. It's a sort of a general use interpreted language that has a huge number of libraries. But more importantly, what Pythonic kind of started in the late 90s was this approach to programming that emphasized readability, debugging, reuse, and coherency, as opposed to sort of efficiency metrics that kind of caused other languages like Java and C++ to choke to death. People would write large programs in Java and C++, and they would be a nightmare for other people to read, whereas the Python code, because it had this Pythonic style that was highly recommended, was readable and shareable. And that kind of got me thinking, okay, what kind of attitudes would you have, what kind of styles would you have to develop in order to make community building online, or community building in sort of a basket weaving sense, where you're taking an online community and then instantiating it in the real world? What would the attitudes have to be? What would the stylistic approaches have to be in order for you to do this really, really well? And so here's a few rules, right? I think that there's sort of a few preconditions you're looking for. And I always have to kind of preface all of these rules for friends or rules for community building with some standards you have to pursue in terms of what you're actually trying to achieve. When you're community building, what are you doing? Why are you here? When you're community building, the main point is to come up with a bond of trust. It's to come up with some group of people that you actually think are going to be reliable in some way, that aren't going to betray you, and that have a certain amount of moral awareness. This is not true online necessarily, right? The parasocial relationship has really shook our perception of how this works. I brought up this character last time, or was it the time before, right? This character called President Sunday that I met in a very early iteration of basket weaving. And this person exists in this completely nihilistic state of he makes a friend online and then he betrays them for drama. He makes another group of friends online and he betrays them for drama. And every time he betrays them and creates drama, he's able to virtue signal and counter signal and pretend like he's this great moral person who's enforcing the standards of the left wing. I think he's a leftist or whatever. Not that it really matters because the guy has absolutely no ethics whatsoever. He's able to portray himself as sort of the standard bearer of ethical behavior for the left online as he throws another one of his friends under the bus. This works great for online content creation because online content creation is based on constantly betraying, constantly subverting other people. For drama, because that's what gives you the impression that you're learning something valuable from this interaction. But that's actually the opposite direction that you need to take. The people you want to build relationships with are people who you have an instinct that they have a certain ability to be loyal and not treacherous, that they're not going to betray you for drama. And despite the fact that this is literally the first person I met while doing basket weaving, I think that real life contexts really do communicate this. This is something that I think Telegram is a horrible social media platform, and I've had a very bad experience with it. But one thing that it has been good at is group chats and developing very tightly curated group chats among similar types of content creators, such that everyone had a rough understanding that people were on the same page. And slowly over the course of 2022, everyone met each other. So that kind of created the basis of loyalty and understanding that, okay, we all have a common purpose here. The other thing I think is, important to two other concepts, and this is something that I always look to as well. There's two things. I think spirituality is something that people have to look for. This is a reason why I'm always kind of hesitant to a certain kind of Nietzschean personality, a certain kind of person that exhibits a knowledge of sort of right-wing theory and right-wing power analysis, but doesn't seem to kind of embrace the poetry of the perspective. People are drawn to politics. The right reason you're in politics, the reason why you should be doing politics, is because you're in love with something, some principle, some goodness that's outside of yourself. Either temporally, you have some object, some spiritual relationship with a deity or a faith tradition, or just relationships with family and an ethnic community yourself, something that you want to preserve and see thrive into the future. And for that reason, you're using power to build a better world. Or if you want to be more abstract about it, you could kind of go the more Platonic route and say you have this deep aesthetic affinity for an ideal. You've committed yourself to an aesthetic ideal, and now your goal is to selflessly give yourself to the pursuit of this aesthetic ideal in the real world. This is the way that healthy politics is done. The way unhealthy politics is done is to kind of game out what's hot, what's not, like Destiny does, and then to kind of hop on to the rhetorical bandwagons to show that you're always the person with the right answers and the smart takes, and to kind of put everyone down. This is harder to procure than you might think, because online corrodes this. The online world is sort of the corrosive substance. It's a corrosive environment that weakens your connection to true spirituality, as it kind of increases your connection to parasociality and prophilicity. And you're kind of stuck behind this wall of illusion. Whenever I try to meet somebody, I try to gauge what their spiritual center is. And I think this is true with a lot of people I met at the Sildings conference in 2022. Is that it's kind of funny, right? Because I met a bunch of people there who I felt were very, I like to call them old souls, people who did have a very kind of passion, an energy to them, a vivacity, and a desire for real spiritual engagement in the real world. And that was so funny is that I have these people who I know are sort of great souls. And this sort of vivacity struggles to express itself online because it just can't. Whenever you're building community, you want to build it with people who have this spiritual inclination. And they put this spiritual inclination first and foremost. And furthermore, to kind of complete the trifecta, you want this spirituality, this loyalty, this dedication to things outside of yourself to be as real as possible and to be as far away from theory as possible. This is always the problem you have with leftists. And one of the reasons why I never really feel like I have very sincere conversations with leftists as a person who tries to engage with them a lot. It always feels fleeting and kind of weirdly. Whenever I talk to a leftist in real life and I'm not really good friends with them, it feels oddly parasocial. It feels like I'm having the same kind of conversations of profiles, conversations of appearances with them in real life that you might have with somebody in Twitter DMs or something like that, right? And that's because I feel like I do think that a lot of leftists started by deeply loving a concept of humanity and a concept of life that they were drawn to aesthetically and spiritually. But at some point, this concept became totally theoretical. And the thing is, when things become theoretical, that means that they're sort of eclipsed by chaos and narcissism ever more quickly. When you go into the online world with a real love of a spiritual community and a real love of your family and a real love of an ethnic group even, right? That's online, of course, being the kind of engine of narcissism and pride that it is, will corrode this spiritual desire. But because it's real, it'll corrode it more slowly. If your spirituality is theoretical, if your religion's theoretical, if your family is theoretical, if you're one of those zero people in the poll I ran, your relationship with your relationship to this core spirituality is going to degrade much faster. And when you come to think about it, I mean, isn't that what Richard Spencer? You look at kind of the joke he's become. I mean, I think he was always a joke. I think I really hated him from day one, to be quite honest. He was a complete douche. But you see that when you look at Spencer now, not only do you see kind of a douchey person, you see someone who's betrayed all their principles. He talked endlessly about white grievance in 2017 when it's hot, and now that white grievance in some sense are more vindicated, and they're more justified than ever with the amount of sort of anti-white rhetoric that's been circulating post 2020. All of a sudden, he's now Rachel Maddow. He's now chastising you for caring about this stuff. Well, that's because he never really loved anything that was truly ethnic. There was never a culture that he wanted to preserve. There was never a people that he wanted to continue. There was never a community he imagined actually living in. All of these things were just theoretical tools, stepping stones for his own prominence and his own ego. And, once they stopped working with the search engine, they were just discarded. this is an attitude that we just have to get out of our heads. And maybe if this only can be cultivated in the real world, then we have to cultivate it in the real world and then bring it online when we're more dedicated and able to actually talk more maturely. Does that mean actually having to kind of downgrade our use of social media to kind of, I've said this many times, is the emergence of AI and the fake internet, is the solution to this to basically go back to Web 1.5 or Web 1.0, where we go to a peer-to-peer network, where we go to absolute data security, where we go to absolute data privacy, and everything, the internet exists basically as a layer to the real world that exists to facilitate real world engagements. And the real world is where it's at, and the online is just an expedient way to catch up with the information, the real things that are going on the ground. I think that would be ideal. I think that there cannot be any organizations among people who haven't met each other in real life. I think that we've learned that. I think that someone mentioned, I was asking this question about optimism and pessimism to my chat on Telegram. And the response was, well, every time we try to organize, all we get are websites and live streams. And that's a good criticism, right? That's a good, like, most of the time when people organize in online spaces and they never met each other. Well, first of all, they're probably not going to be working very hard because their dedication probably has a little bit more of a theoretical rather than real dimension to it. But furthermore, the product of their work is going to be 100% focused on online things, which are themselves kind of ephemeral. Live streams are all good, but the problem with a community of live streamers is that live streamers are usually focused on the personality of individual people. Now, some people like Academic Agent can really make this work in the panel format. I've never been very good at organizing panels. I suck at it, so this is why you're hearing me now as a singleton. Maybe you'll have someone on, we can talk about an issue or something like that. But the thing is that you really don't need an organization to run live streams. It can work, and it's good if you have an organization. Your organization might want to host live streams, but the organization needs to be predominantly about in real life events and in real life people. This is why the Beowulf Foundation and the Old Glory Club were created in real life and now have an existence online. And I'll predict that the success of these organizations is largely going to hinge on their ability to periodically be in real life. And this is something else I wanted to, this is something that I'll talk about that a little bit later. So going back down on my list here, the 12 Pythonic points about social organization. I guess this goes without saying. Physical is better than online. If you can, always organize physically. Now, of course, I think what most people listening, probably what they do is they get their politics online, and then they have sort of a double life in real life. They have a double life where they do their work, they do their recreational activities, they do their third place activities, their religious worship, in a sphere that's totally disconnected from their online ideas. I don't have a solution to this that's ready-made for everyone. But this is a wall that has to be battered down as much as possible. A large amount of it's generational. A large amount of it is legal. Obviously, the ideas that we discuss here are in many ways, and in most countries, illegal to discuss or even mention in most workplaces. So there are limitations. But life looks very, very different if you have one or two or three or four friends that you do regular activities with that share some of your ideological perspectives, or perhaps all of your ideological perspectives. The way you approach ordinary activities looks different. The other thing I think you want to emphasize always when building community is deep is better than shallow. It's kind of funny that every one of these things is the exact opposite direction that you ordinarily get from online, right? Because what do you want to emphasize online? Like, I'm looking right now when I'm talking to you guys right now, and there's this little tab on my live stream, and that tells me, 160 people or so are watching this right now. And sometimes it's 200, sometimes it's 80, who knows, right? This is, you can watch the people watching this live stream in real life. Everything in an online space is geared towards massive, shallow interactions and very geared away from depth. The problem here is that this can't actually go anywhere. When you look at communities like Destiny or Vosh, these communities are massive, and they're larger than anything that you see on the right, hands down. But these communities are a mile wide and an inch deep. Everyone is in these places for purposes of entertainment and for some kind of weird parasocial relationship that cannot be sustained. We are a community of humans, not celebrities. As a human, you have Dunbar's number wired into your cerebellum at a deep level. You have 150 to 250 slots for friends. You cannot have 40,000 friends. And although I like to think that everyone who watches my streams is a potential friend that I'd meet in the real world, I'm a human too. I've got 150 to 250 slots up here for friendships. And the thing is that I shouldn't be spending effort to facilitate 10,000 more YouTube subscribers. I'll work on my channel. I'll make content if it helps people and it gives you information that you need. I should be working on getting the absolute best set of those deep friendships I possibly can. Because those deep connections are going to be what actually is part of you as a human being. So when the popularity wanes, so that when people go on to find some other entertainment product, those relationships will maintain. Those relationships will forge new bonds, new communities, new action, and something that's actually deeper and more lasting. Ultimately, Destiny is a good example of this. He was the most prominent individual vlogger across the space of 2017 to 2019, with the possible exception of Sargon, very ironically. But I think that Destiny will have absolutely no impact on the idea space of the internet whatsoever. He will be an absolute footnote, because all he did in that time is to provide an entertainment product and support the status quo. He didn't build any institutions. He didn't change anyone's perspective on things. He didn't pioneer any kind of new direction and thought. All he did was make it easier for the sort of millennial progressive perspective that was already reigning in 2013 to recover its losses temporarily going into 2020. And what he'll leave behind him is an incredibly shallow community that can't actually deliver on anything that people need. We have to accept this as a limitation to our focus. We only have so many hours in the day. We only have so many things that we can actually produce. It's better to produce, and this goes for content too. It's better to produce an essay than a live stream, or a video essay than a live stream. It's better to produce a monograph or a well-considered essay than it is just a blog post blurb. It's better to produce a book than it is a long-form essay. Although I've never written a book, I have kind of wanted to put one together. It's better to create a work of art than it is to create a political book. It's better to produce a novel or a work of spiritual theory, of spiritual philosophy, than it is to produce a political tirade. And, beyond even art, it's better to live the life of a saint and to be a spiritual master than to produce art at all, to have your life itself be your art. We all have to make decisions, but insofar as we're on this path, we should be going in the exact opposite direction that the online's trying to take us. We need to be going from the shallow to the deep. The online space is an engine of chaos. It's an engine of entropy. It's an engine of betrayal. I can't remember what word Alex Kashuta used for it. I think she said defection. Everything online always urges you to defect, defect, defect. Take the easy way. Go shallow. Get your dopamine hits now. Don't build for the future. Go for popularity. Go for flash. Go for the hits. Go for the attention. This is the attention economy, after all, right? Well, I don't want to be part of the attention economy. I'm part of the spiritual bond economy. We're part of the relationship economy. It's the same thing that's true for online dating. Online dating apps want to sell dates. But anyone who's worried about the survival of the human race, and I worry about this all the time, they know that online dating does not need to sell dates. It needs to sell matches. But the whole problem with matches is that once you have a match, you can't, unless you're maybe Muslim or some other polygamous religion, although not caveat, I know not all Muslims are accepting of polygamy, right? Unless you have that avenue in your faith, once you're matched, you're not in the market anymore for a match. Once you have a deep friendship, that's one deep friendship you can't have because you're a limited creature. That's less time you've spent in the attention economy. What we're trying to do essentially is to create a heat pump to reverse entropy. Anybody who studied engineering knows that essentially what air conditioners do, what we call HVACs, heating, ventilation, and air conditions, what HVACs do, if you're a mechanical engineering student like me, is they're essentially heat pumps. They expend energy to reverse entropy. And that is what all of our efforts on the right wing are to do. Our efforts on the right wing is to expend the energy we have as humans to reverse entropy so that we can build substantial community that lasts. Of course, entropy degrades it, but we are limited creatures, and our efforts have to be to take this from the entropic state and to put it back into the ordered state. Anything short of that is essentially just letting the ball roll down the hill and furthering the objectives of our opponents. If we can't build deep community, we aren't doing anything as right-wingers. And that does mean taking a step away from the attention economy. But and even when I say this, even when I do this live stream, I know this isn't like the sexiest topic for a live stream, obviously, right? I'm giving you like a Jordan Peterson, this is how you build community in real life. I'd much rather be talking about something like, well, I don't know, since I'm not on Twitter, I can't really complain about these people anymore. I'd much rather be complaining about a leftist. That'd be way more entertaining, right? Or some piece of woke propaganda. But that's so fake. I don't really consume that anymore. And this is the project that we're all working on. This is the project that we're all working on. And a lot of these deep relationships that we build, they'll have to be intergenerational. Obviously people like Rod Dreher crossed a lot of lines against our community when we talk about Rod Dreher as being kind of the epitome of sort of generational disconnect because he seems so close to getting it and then he never gets it. It's sort of like Charlie Brown with the football. Rod Dreher is constantly trying to take the full red pill and he always runs up to it and slips and falls. And in most recent cases, he ends up destroying a lot of other people's careers very, very tragically. And something that's the thing that people find very hard to forgive him for. But if we are in the project of building deep and building in real life, we're going to have to create this generational bridge at some stage. And that will mean being friends with people who are going through the same process that Rod Dreher is. And maybe they will never kick the football. But your goal is to kind of be friends with them anyway and to kind of hold their hands through this process of transformation. Unless they're very old, they will recognize that you are actually helping them adjust to being in the real world. And they'll appreciate that even if there are some ideological steps that they can't take. Even if there's some breaks that they can't make from the, what do we want to call it? The 20th century thought regime or the boomer truth regime, as Academic Agent says. And the last one on this page, halfway point. This is the thing that I think a lot of people in the basket weaving community need to remember. Consistency is the core of all social engagement and all friendship. Having a good weave where you meet up with people and have a great dinner is great. But the biggest thing you need to make sure happens is that this happens periodically, every month, once every 2 months, once every 2 weeks, once every week if you're really good at this. It needs to be consistent. As a young man, well, when I was a young man, nothing needed to be consistent. Everything was just on the fly. What was sort of striking me as fanciful at the time. But this is not something when you're older, and this is a process of maturation here. When you're older and you're leaning more on community, things need to be consistent because things need to be planned for. And if you can get yourself into a pattern, it actually requires less effort. Dunbar's number, they say it's 150, but you can get it up higher. But the way you get your Dunbar number higher, Dunbar being the number of relationships that you can actually have a deep connection with, is to have the relationships be in certain contexts that are very familiar for you. So these are the people that I bowl with. These are the people who I work on literary projects with. These are the people I play music with. These are the people I work with. These are the people that are my son's friends. And the consistency and the relational aspect to the flow of time actually allows you to build deeper and should be put into consideration. So I guess this is one other thing too. We're not in a position right now that I think this is oftentimes the cycle that we get into online, is that the left does this too. The thing is, the left can afford to do this because they're funded. The left can afford to do this because they're throttled. They're not perceived as an enemy force of the system the way the right wing does. But the natural course of most online communities is to kind of go through this cycle. The cycle is whenever something on the left comes up, you bond together in this huge negative community, like the New Atheism community, like Gamergate. Gamergate was the ultimate negative energy community, right? Like, we're really, really angry at progressives, right? We're really, really angry at progressives. Or later on, like the sort of right wing of 2017, like, we're really, really angry at all of these wokies. And look at this next woke pop culture. Isn't it terrible? Just this week, there was this, Hershey's did some kind of woke maneuver with the Hershey bar. And these absolute grifters, I think it was from the Daily Wire, like 2 days afterwards, while everyone was outraged posting about these Hershey chocolates that were being delivered by the Hershey's Corporation, they were right out the door with the he, him, she, her candy bars. And just selling overpriced chocolate to people who were just wanted to stick it to the progressives. This negative energy is, it's fun. It's cathartic, but it leads nowhere, right? And so everyone, they're riding this big hate boner they have for progressives. They get about 3 months into it, and then you realize, oh shit, we don't have anything to build because we don't agree on anything. Okay, so what eventually happens is you start looking to kind of scapegoat other members of your community. And this is, the classic example would be the Catholics and the Catholic community and the Bap community inside the present right wing. They start scapegoating each other, pointing fingers at each other, and you immediately you immediately go into schism. And there's huge drama, and everyone kind of breaks apart and mutual hatred, and you break off into your own entertainment communities. But for a while, that's good, right? Because now you can relive the cycle of catharsis. Now, instead of pointing your finger and laughing at progressives, you're pointing your finger and laughing at the other right-wingers over there that are Nietzscheans or Christian cucks or whatever, and it's all very, and then the entertainment cycle continues. It is true that the anti-progressive movement, the anti-progressive moment that we're experiencing, is a highly diverse negative movement. But we cannot actually do anything if it breaks into mutually fighting groups that are just subverting each other. The result has to be sort of a segmentation of interests, a sort of patchwork. Always accomplish things by saying, this is not what I'm interested in. This is an inappropriate I like that word a lot. This is an inappropriate forum to discuss this particular venue. You're probably better served going over here. You're probably better served building over here. In this space, we are building something for Christians or for Catholics. Always, and kind of communicate always that this doesn't mean that we're not fighting on the same side against the forces of modernity, against the forces of I don't know what the right way, the global American empire, whatever we want to call it, the forces of the mainstream. We understand that the forces of the mainstream and that have allied themselves with kind of the corrosive forces of modernism need to be overcome. We understand that this can't be done individually. But the right way to do this is to always kind of use space and interest categories to overcome these divisions. Really, if you're working on building, this shouldn't be a problem. Similarly, I think this is true. Gatekeeping is necessary to a certain extent, but gatekeeping is really only necessary to get rid of people who violate sort of the first three principles I brought up in this talk. You're really only trying to gatekeep out people who are being treacherous, people who are being immoral, or people who are being just absolutely disruptive to whatever group process is going on. You're not actually in a mode of trying to gatekeep the political movement generally, because the political movement exists sort of in a mode of pure rejection. There are sort of two simultaneous projects that are going on right now. First, a pure rejection of modernity and sort of the establishment that's profiting off of modernity. And the second one, a sort of a more segmented, more individualized project of building up individual communities that are necessarily have to be tighter and more bonded. The gatekeeping, there's two kinds of gatekeeping, I guess. The first one is to get people to go to the appropriate community for the project they want to pursue. You might be a very, very devout pagan, but there are certain things that you can't participate in with me if you're a devout pagan. When we do things concerning spirituality, that's just going to have to be something where you have your area and I have my own, right? Then there's like a broader problem with gatekeeping, which is to get rid of just people who are subverting things and being bad actors. Just a few weeks ago, there was an individual that I thought was a friend who kind of started this horrible campaign of defamation against another woman in our community, accusing her of sexual impropriety publicly, and expecting her to kind of respond, like expecting her to be put on trial for accusations that were really not credible. This kind of behavior is totally unacceptable because we cannot actually do anything if people are constantly subverting and backstabbing each other in public. We can't operate if you're going to kind of pull a Rod Dreher and get everyone canceled because they said naughty words in an anonymous forum on the internet. That's not going to work. No ability to build is going to work if you're in cahoots with the thought police to rat out everybody, right? So there's sort of two elements of this. You need to gatekeep in the way of segmenting people into their proper communities, but other than that, you only want to actually exclude and excommunicate when people are exhibiting actually bad behavior. And in virtually all other circumstances, what you want to be focused on is outreach and alliance building. As I always want to say, friends are assets and enemies are liabilities. A main goal of the distant sphere should be to be building a bridge between what we ordinarily call distant right-wingers or far right-wingers or post-right-wingers and post-leftists. The post-leftist sphere is a growing area of thought. People are aware progressivism's promises don't hold any weight. And we need to be able to build alliances there. The last two things I kind of want to bring up. People talk about this on the left. They say, well, we are a community of mutual need. We are a community of weakness. There's there's this bread tuber who I enjoy kind of hate watching sometimes, although I've tried to stop that, called Thought Slum. I made a video about him a year or two ago, and he's kind of like the embodiment of your stereotype about what a progressive male-bodied individual is like. I don't know what they identify as, but whatever. But he has a live stream series, like I do these days, where he does monologues, and he calls it the Weekends, and it's a celebration of vulnerability and weakness. This builds on this leftist idea that you're building a community of mutual need. This is these 3 points are kind of going to be put together to kind of. I hate this concept so much when it comes up on the left. I hate this concept so much because it's a perversion of the Christian notion. And I hate this. I'm very much in the line with G.K. Chesterton when I feel this way very, very distinctly. Where you have this sort of Nietzschean notion of communities of pure strength, and then you have this idiotic leftist notion of communities of pure need. And you're just staring at this and go, this is absolute insanity from a Christian point of view. The Christian point of view is that these things are brought together both in their full strength. As G.K. Chesterton said it very famously, Christianity is a way of combining two opposites in a way that lets each of them contribute the fullness of its good and none of its evil. Communities of strength will descend into backbiting and betrayal, absolutely, every single time. If they have no moral foundation or no understanding of weakness that is to be fixed, which is what communities of strength imply, they will absolutely disintegrate. Whereas communities of weakness, unless they're literally getting funding from some external source, will also completely collapse. Anybody who's been in some kind of co-op or some kind of intentional community knows of the free rider problem. And the second the super chats dry up and there's no more drama to go around in the leftist community, what do? They all turn on each other. There can be no communities of weakness. There can be no communities of strength. And that's because, it's just we have to start with the basic truth that health is better than weakness. Yet at the same time, strength owes weakness healing. The way we react to witnessing weakness in our fellow man is to heal the weakness and to make it better. And if we are not directing our strength towards those ends, we have essentially descended into a weird state of chaos and into a weird state of anti-humanness that will disintegrate all social bonds we have. Because if weakness is something that we pile on spite into, as opposed to an avenue for charity, it will disintegrate everything that is truly spiritual about the human being. And this is why I so hate. I think that in many ways I sympathize with the Nietzscheans and the pagans more than with the progressives. Although I guess arguably you could say that they're reacting to each other. Because it's so obvious that they see sort of the obsequious, simpering figures of modern left-wingers and think to themselves, well, I don't want to be like that. And maybe that's what Christianity is talking about when it talks about turning the other cheek and it talks about charity. It's talking about just a celebration of weakness, by which weakness is declared to be strength itself, and is declared even in fact to have political authority over strength. Both of these perspectives are kind of infuriating because it's so obvious to me that they're embracing evil in the name of opposing each other. All communities that we engage in as humans, as moral individuals, have to recognize that health is the goal, spiritual health and physical health. Healing, development, and mentorship have to be the order of the day. And because of this, there is this incredible need for charity. There is this incredible need to ask for charity and to provide charity. To be able to bring forward weakness into a community, not to demand that it be celebrated, not to be demanded certainly. Weakness cannot be celebrated. Weakness cannot be given political power, certainly. But weakness does have to be healed. Weakness does have to be met with compassion It does have to be brought upwards. It does have to be given an avenue to find its own salvation in something that's stronger than itself. This is how you square the circle. The only friends you really have are friends that you've been able to show weakness to, and they have not taken advantage of that weakness, but have instead tried to actually fix that weakness. And in the same way, the way you know that you're actually a friend to somebody is because you've witnessed them in a state of weakness. And your reaction to their weakness is to actually try to use your strength to heal them. It's only in this last process that I think true bonds are formed, is that when we start doing favors to each other, when we actually act charitable to each other's weakness for the purpose of greater spiritual strength. When that happens, I think the true absolute bond is formed that will never be broken. I sincerely believe. A macrocosmic view that I kind of wanted to end with here, and this is my last slide for tonight. We talk a little bit about, I've got this weird thing here. Okay, my bad. I'm talking a little bit about basket weaving, and people say I talk about basket weaving a lot, but I don't explain it. Well, the basket weaving project was started in academic agents community, and then it was kind of co-shared by a community that I had called the Cana Society or Clear Trads for a while, until that kind of was destroyed by Discord. And it's kind of being reformed now with the whole Beowulf stuff. And the idea, though, and this is what's very, very important about basket weaving itself is not an organization. I'm going to say this again. Basket weaving itself is not an actual organization. It's the seedbed for an organization. It's a tool by which people who listen to podcasts like this, like podcasts like the Academic Agent, can take their own desire to meet people with ideological sympathies and bring them in the real world and to follow the process of making actual bonds. The purpose of a basket weaving group should be to grow and then to kind of build other things, to kind of sprout up new institutions that are able to operate independently, or maybe even link up with existing institutions that are operating currently. Like the Old Glory Club, for instance, is literally a fellowship. It literally is a 501c3. It literally has a constitution. It literally has ideological planks to it. It literally has a charter. And although I believe they're not accepting membership right now, if you have an in real life organization that wants to kind of meet and link up with the Old Glory Club for the purpose of activism and social organization, that's your ticket for fulfilling the agenda of the Old Glory Club. But basket weaving is much more general than that. Basket weaving is just, we know people who are broadly aligned with the perspective that they want to increase human health, and they recognize that modernity is threatening to that, and they just want to meet with other people who are trying to escape the insanity and see what grows from that. In my mind, the role of a basket weaving community should kind of work like this little diagram I have here, right? The first goal of any region of basket weaving should be to forge a group of people who meet periodically in a region, whether it's 2 people or 10 people or whatever, and to kind of grow this community of people who periodically meet with these perspectives, who want to discuss things. Usually what most people do with weaving is to start with discussion of issues and kind of mulling over usually the very pessimistic news that you view, just being on the internet or whatever, and to contextualize it among other people in the real world and to get a better perspective on it. The next step should be growth and outreach, to find other people who think similarly to you. We know that the total number of people who are actually dissident against the modern world order is enormous. Relative to what we actually embody online, relative to what we actually experience in the real world, there should be no country, state, or community you live in where you can't find another person your age, or at least 3 people of your age group, that aren't feeling very similarly to you in a broad sense when it comes to reacting to the modern American order, or to modernity itself, or to sort of the corrosive influence of technology. You should have no problem, if we're doing this right, to find fellow travelers. And if you're good at organizing, if you're good at outreach, if you're good at finding people who are kind of thinking differently or kind of breaking away from the leftist worldview, you're able to grow that community into something that actually can actually try to do something that's more substantial. So when you grow your community to a certain size of people who are just in this to basket weave, the next question is, what's next? What really should come next is segmentation, refocusing, and specialization. So, for instance, if you have people who are really into Catholicism, sounds trite, and for religion, if you have people who are Catholics and they want to put together an adoration at their local church, 3 young people who are really into this and a priest that's willing to listen to them all at the same time can make that happen. If you have people who are really into this thing like Warhammer 40K or firearm training or outdoors, you can refocus and regroup, and as opposed to having the basket weaving group that's just there so that people can meet other people who are reasonably aware of the problems we discuss on this channel, you can now go and play a Warhammer 40K game, or play a game of chess, or a game of Go, or run a marathon, or organize an adoration group, or a rosary group, or a men's group, or what have you, or maybe even participate in local government. These now become seed groups of things that actually are able to build in real life. And really, especially for men, and this is really more for men than it is for women, which these groups tend to be majority men, if not entirely men. Talking is good, and if you want to do some kind of salon or speaker series, I highly encourage that. I think that's a great idea for a basket weaving goal. But men, as men in community, need to eventually segue pure community and pure just drinking and hashing out the news of the day. They need to actually segue that into some kind of action or building. And what ultimately comes from resegmentation and refocus are not just do basket weaving groups, but eventually, as these things become more formalized, they're grouped together, hopefully into new institutions like the Beowulf Foundation or the Old Glory Club. And this becomes the seedbed for something that's more organized and more able to do things internationally, and that has actually ability to ask for funding, to receive funding, and that's a good first step. Okay, so this is sort of the end of the talk. I talked a little bit. I said this is about optimism, how to find optimism in fellowship. I guess I didn't talk really about optimism itself. All I can say is that I was very pessimistic about real life, and not real life. I was pessimistic about online, and I obviously gave up Twitter for Lent, but I caught myself cheating on my Lenten vows, and I took a time off on Sunday. Sunday, sometimes some Catholics kind of give themselves a reprieve from their Lenten fast, and my wife was obviously kind of shooting daggers at me for being on Twitter because it makes me depressed typically. But I happened upon the fact that, our good friend Carl Benjamin had a new child, which, that's really what it's all about, isn't it? That what it's all about is creating new human life and the foundations through which new human life can actually thrive. We've lost so much over the last 2 years, so much over the last 6 or 7 years, that it's really hard to take stock of. There was a world in the 2000s that wasn't as atomized and as politicized and as bitter as the world is right now. We can rebuild that in microcosm. I can see people in the chat saying, well, I'm worried that the energy that we have, it's lost. It's too dispersed to build anything. All that means is that it gets built smaller, right? All that means is that we maybe the soil is too degraded to replant the oak tree, as our friend Curtis Yarvin said, or the oak tree is too damaged for it to be literally just teetered up, the stump to be kind of the trunk to be just kind of reinserted into the ground. But the soil is not too degraded to make something small and life-giving, like a seed, like an acorn. It's not too small to build something small that can survive the winter. We are in a cultural winter. If the energy is too low for you to build something like you remembered it in 2010, just go to the thing that's the next level down and start building there. Eventually, you'll discover some level of human organization that is small enough so that there is enough energy to sustain it and build it, and to build a relationship. That build true relationships of trust and charity and virtue. And if you're sort of following the guidelines I laid out, that actually can flower forth into something that actually will last, into relationships that actually will last. And that will be a foundation for bigger things to eventually rebound off of it in the future. And I think that's the hope I have. Obviously, there's the hope of new life coming from new children and people expanding their families. But I also have faith that my biggest worry is that people are going to, obviously I'm having a family. This is one thing about right-wing content creators, is that virtually all of the left-wingers in 2017 had gender transitions. And all the right-wingers had families and children. But my big fear is that we're going to get to the end of this process, and I'm not going to be able to bequeath my son or any of my future children, God willing, anything that I can give them that's at all commensurate to what I had. We have to start building now for that to be there in the future. And I think this is my best hope going forward. So with that, guys, I'm going to go to the intermission, and I will await any super chats you guys have. I'll see you on the other end, probably about another minute. I caught myself laughing, probably on a hot cam, when I saw someone on the chat saying, "Let's all go to the lobby." It reminded me of the that whole movie intermission thing. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby and get ourselves a snack. Okay. Coming back to the super chats. Thank you guys for staying on. Oh, by the way, one thing that makes these things harder for me to pull off is that another way I always use Twitter. And Telegram has actually gotten worse now that Twitter has become more based. A huge number of people that used to use Telegram because they didn't want to use Twitter have gone back to Twitter, and Telegram's become even more poisonous. So I don't dare pose the questions to Telegram anymore. But I do really want people to give me suggestions always for what you want the monologues to be on. I have to fill up an hour worth of talking and slides, and I don't know. The problem is that news events are good, but oftentimes the problem with news events are that I'm not going to have a radically different take than, say, like Aaron McIntyre. And I'm a side hustler here, right? Aaron McIntyre is the professional. I don't work during the weekdays to make content, so I'm going to be coming to the kill late on those issues. So in the meantime, I always would appreciate anybody in the chat or who wants to DM me I do check my Twitter DMs very regularly. Since I have the nervous habit of checking Twitter, all I do is refresh my message page. So you'll probably get a very prompt reply if you DM me. If you have any suggestions about future topics for monologues, I would be very, very happy to hear them. Okay, great. So first super chat of the night, as usual, Ben White. Hey Dave, a great stream with Martin Sellner. It's a shame that I couldn't make it. I would have definitely asked Martin for tips on how to find a trad wife. But the real question is, how do you know you're ready to be a trad husband and father? This is obviously the trick, isn't it? Right? The big problem with, for people who don't know, I did interview Martin Sellner on Saturday, and Saturday is sort of the day I use for all of the people who are on European time zones, since European time zones are very hard to schedule. So eventually I'll have to contact Conscious Caracol as well about the South Africa thing, because they're on European time as well. But they can't make this time frame here. And so I have to negotiate it on Saturdays, which is very difficult for me to do. But, okay, and this is... so I guess Martin Sellner has found the ultimate trad wife, and I guess so have I. I always think, it's funny because Martin Sellner, he found his trad wife... by essentially stealing her from my own native California, right? And I found my trad wife by stealing her from Canada, right? So in the game of trad wife musical chairs, there's probably some poor Canadian schmuck who's kind of been left out of this process. Maybe he can poach one from Austria, right? But we have all these sort of expat German, expat Central Americans, that women, and everyone's going abroad to find theirs. But I guess the ultimate question for men is, are you ready to be a husband? And I feel that this is really in your soul. If you date women, and this is really why if I didn't have moral compulsions against premarital sex, from a Catholic point of view, I would advise men against, just practically speaking, engaging in sort of extramarital sex. Is that the thing is that a long dating process or a protracted dating process before sexual intimacy, it really does test you to see if you're ready to be a husband. Because eventually sort of there's this, I forget what it's called. Is it something like luminance or whatever? There's this feeling you have when you first meet a new person. It's this hit of dopamine you get that oh my God, it's a new person. I'm so excited. I want to escalate all the way. And the thing is that when this escalates to intimacy, men develop this strange kind of holding pattern. Like there's an intimate relationship that's kind of like marriage, but there's no commitment attached to it. And originally you had the rush of the actual relation, and now you have the pattern of like living together, but it's not commitment. Guys can stay in that pattern forever and never make up their mind. Whereas if you go through a sort of courtship process where the initial hit of meeting the person for the first time wears off, but you're not living together in sort of a phony marriage that's not really a marriage, your instinct as a guy will either to be fish or cut bait. Now, oftentimes it can be a little bit too long. I've been in chase relationships where it's gone on for a month or two longer than it really should have, and that's never a good deal. You're basically wasting the girl's time more than anything else. But at least it doesn't take this form that a lot of modern millennial men get into, where they're in this quasi non-marital marital state that is it's really poisonous, and it can go on for years. I think that if you know yourself among other men and you have a protracted courtship, you'll have an instinct in yourself whether you're ready to actually commit to this woman forever and to kind of take the jump. Because you have to understand that the marriage is kind of a jump into the abyss. And men are either ready to make that Geronimo jump, or they're not. And you have to get to the point where, as a guy, because as a guy, there's always this instinct you have in your soul to pull away from commitment. You have to be at that point where your inner guy soul says, pull away from commitment. You're not, this is a relationship where you're not sowing wild oats. So go to the next village where you can sow wild oats. You have to get past that instinct and still want to kind of jump into the abyss of marriage, and then you're ready to be the husband. And I guess there's the tried and true method of going through a more chaste courtship process where you just kind of overcome this up front, or there's kind of the millennial way where you live together and hope at some point that even though you are sowing wild oats, you'll want to commit, and you'll go from cad mode to dad mode, as Louise Perry says. Ben White says, for $3, he says, don't check your 401k, Dave. Powell said that the Fed may raise interest rates sooner and cause the market to drop. I'm getting the feeling that much of our economy is detached from actual production. Well, I mean, you're right about that. It's just how that we can actually hedge on it. That's the real question. Yeah. So going on to the next one here. Okay, a machine 1862 for $50 USA. Dave, you're Catholic. Stop taking our Lord's name in vain like a filthy pagan. Did I use the Lord's name in vain in this live stream? Did I say Jesus? Or I guess maybe, did I say God in an irritated way? That's, well, I sincerely apologize, Machine 1862, if I did say the Lord's name in vain. This is sort of my old atheist habits, my old California habits of saying Jesus or God. As sort of an interjection has caught up with me. But thank you for your very generous super chat. I guess this is the reverse of a swear jar. You're putting money in the jar when I swear, which is probably not the best incentive, but thank you very much. Anyway, I'm going to go on here. Novum for $10 USA. I stumbled upon many old HTML websites I used frequently as a young child decades ago. Surprisingly, they were never updated, yet somehow they must have been paying the bills to keep them hosted. I'm pleased to see that the old internet is not dead. People's inability to correctly type a URL must have helped. Well, yeah, I guess so. I mean, Substack has proved to me definitively that Internet 1.0 was really the correct internet. Substack has everything that we want in a blogging platform. And it has none of this parasocial social media stuff. You go to Substack to read good essays, or to communicate with people who are reading something in a certain Substack area. You do not go to Substack to build some kind of parasocial relationship with an online personality. And I realize the irony of saying that while doing a live stream reading super chats. Hopefully you've gotten some useful information in this live stream. Hopefully I've encouraged you to check out basket weaving or to check out the Old Glory Club. I believe basket weaving is linked in the description. I don't know about Old Glory Club because other than the YouTube channel, which I've showed before, I'm not so sure what that organization, what their front page is at the moment. And I'm not exactly sure the appropriate way to show them because they're not at the moment in a mode where they're taking on new members. I don't think they have had that established yet. So, hopefully you've gotten something from this stream. But the purpose of online web 1.0 is to get information. It's to get insight. It is not to build a profile, other than maybe to build a reputation building something. If you're a good poet, you put your poems on Substack, you get credit for them. If you're a good essayist, you put them on Substack, you get credit for them. The profile itself, the personality being displayed is not so much a part of that. And hopefully, even myself being kind of a creature of Web 2.0, hopefully we can appropriately move back into that. before AI and deepfakes just flood the internet with fake shit that does not actually mean anything. There was this horrible emotion I had the other week when I was looking, I think on Telegram. Someone had posted this animation of steamed hams. So steamed hams was this, it's the Simpsons parody where they have this absolutely stupid, it's this Simpsons short where Principal Skinner has Superintendent Chalmers over for dinner to impress him. You know, the superintendent is Principal Skinner's boss. This is actually something I think aired on The Simpsons. And he's serving steamed hams and everything goes wrong. It's a comedy of errors type deal. And eventually the house burns down or whatever. And it's kind of a bunch of sour late Simpsons jokes, or maybe, not late Simpsons, but mid-late Simpsons jokes. But for a while on the internet, the pattern was to make variations of this or re-edits that were subversive. And the thing is that so there's like a billion versions of the steamed ham Simpsons joke that are re-edited or reconfigured or reanimated. And so I saw a new version of steamed hams that was in this style of sort of a 1960s Soviet or Central European animation. So, if anyone's ever watched sort of I know this is French, not Soviet, but the kind of Fantastic Planet style animations, or, the kind of animations you'd see in Monty Python. These are like paper cutouts being moved along the screen. This was sort of the 60s or 70s animation style in Central Europe. And this guy had done the steamed hams routine in this style. And it was very clever. My first thought was, this is AI. the AI saw the Soviet style and then it deep faked the steamed ham because there's a billion copies of it. And it superimposed one on the other. And then this was the product. It was actually a product of this guy's meticulous effort to animate this using animation tools. And yet all the effort, and my first instinct is that this is the product of a search term. And I mean, that was deeply depressing to me. I mean, I want people to be able to express something in their art. And the fact that now everything I see on the internet immediately is considered to be some kind of fake. It makes me take a step back. I immediately have to know that something has an author before I invest something emotionally in it. Now, I understand that these deep fakes, like, it's not like the computer is actually generating this. What the computer is doing is it's taking things that have sincere emotion in them from other people, and it's just modulating them. It's mutating them into some new thing. So really, when you see a deepfake that has emotion in it, you're vicariously getting the emotion and sublimity that other people have been putting into products online, and it's being redigested. But still, that's not good enough for me because I don't know what other ideas are being inserted into the deepfake algorithm that could be manipulating me subconsciously. And so there's this layer of suspicion in it that I can't overcome. And so now every time I see something on the internet, I want to immediately know whether I'm viewing some kind of mutation of art in the deepfake generator, or whether I'm viewing actual art. Eric Lefebvre for $15 USA. Going on to the next super chat. That was a big digression. Any advice on, I think, what was the previous content? HTML. And yeah, so I was like, why Web 1.0 is coming back is because I think AI is going to kill Web. I think AI is going to kill Web 2.0. And I think the fundamental I think that Web 2.0 is going to burn itself out. Someone's saying, look at the hands, Dave. Okay, whatever. I think Web 2.0 is going to burn itself out via TikTok, via short attention spans, and via the race to the lowest common denominator. And AI is going to help that along a certain amount. And what people will want is they'll want something more like Web 1.0, where there's sort of a chain of command to where ideas come from and what generated them. And one thing that Web 1.0 was really good at doing was preserving information, tracing lines of communication, and resisting censorship. And Substack has demonstrated that there's still a market for this. And I think that this will be and Telegram, in many ways, Telegram is like the Web 1.0 social media. I just wish that there were better people on Telegram. And literally the only thing you can get from Telegram is group chats, because the public environment, the public posting environment in Telegram is so absolutely toxic. But still, these things are the future of the internet. In the same way that the third world is the future and the third world is the past, I definitively believe that Web 1.0 is the future of humanity on the internet, and Web 2.0 is the past. But thank you. Going on to Eric Lafarb's question. Any advice on getting through important books you don't like? Currently reading Once and Future King, and it's a slog. It's a modern retelling of the Arthurian tale, and it's a subversion of the original tale. It denigrates the martial value and treats medieval values with veiled contempt. Yeah, I guess so. I mean, so Once and Future King obviously is a book I haven't read since high school. So I'm really far away from this book. I kind of liked it at the time, and when I read Once and Future King, this was before the internet, so my attention span was much larger than it was right now. But as modern people who interact with the internet, you have to force yourself to read in patterns. This is something that you have to. Okay, so lots of different questions here. First of all, I kind of want to react to Once and Future King. Once and Future King, you may recognize the first few chapters of Once and Future King as being the inspiration of Disney's The Sword and the Stone. Most of which their apocryphal relations of Arthur's early years as a child is taken from T.H. White's Once and Future King. And there's also a good follow-up called The Book of Merlin, too, after Once and Future King. But I do agree that this was kind of a subversive retelling of the King Arthur tale. All of the exploits in terms of questing knights is de-emphasized, and sort of the psychological foibles of the characters are re-emphasized. I don't remember it being quite as subversive as you're letting on right now, Eric, but I'll take it that it's something like Norma Rae, where you don't see the subversion in Norma Rae until you view Norma Rae post 2016 and with new eyes. Maybe Once and Future King is like that. Like, you reread it post 2016, you're like, holy shit. This stuff is super subversive. But if you're reading a book that you don't like, the tried and true way to read the book is to just set yourself goals, read a chapter, and focus on the language and focus on appreciating the sentences as they're written. I think it's T.H. White. T.H. White may be subversive, but he was certainly a good writer. And he was from an English literary tradition that we can't hope to approximate these days. The wordsmithing he took to Once and Future King, when compared to something like The Hunger Games or God forbid, Twilight, is these and very much Once and Future King was made for a very similar audience when he wrote it. I think the 20s or whatever. It's just a world. The use of the English language is just so much better. So if you can read Once and Future King less like you're trying to absorb how he's using the language, like he's teaching you how to use the language, that would be a much better use of your time. Or it would keep you motivated, I think. The other thing too is, and this holds more true for reading things like Thomas Carlyle, where and Thomas Carlyle is an incredibly difficult author for modern readers to read. You read Joseph de Maistre, and it just, where does the time go? It's so easy, right? But Carlyle, it's a little bit of a slog, right? Because his prose is so laborious. And I think, I like Yarvin's perspective on this. You have to train yourself to read poetry first, and to kind of take in sentences as they are, and not as just, when we read sentences as moderns, we read them as sort of just snippets of information that get you to a different place. They have to move really, really quickly. But Victorians didn't view sentences like that. Victorians viewed sentences like stanzas of poetry. They are individual meditations that are supposed to hang in the air and that you have to kind of reflect on a little bit. And some prose has to be read in a more laborious way. So once you train yourself to kind of appreciate language and piecemeal like that, you can kind of make better progress on this front. So those are my two pieces of advice, Eric. I hope the reading of White's King Arthur tale goes a bit better for you. Novum for $5 USA. Only 2 months with a cheap personal trainer and a dating coach, and I'm already getting the dates I always wanted. Forgive the canned language, but it blows me away how far some people are from their goals if they just make a few correct changes. Well, I mean, people ask me for dating advice all the time, and I've never had a dating coach. I mean, a personal trainer would certainly be good for losing weight. I'm trying to lose. Actually, I've recently lost about 8 pounds. That's kind of nice, I guess. And I'm hoping to lose about 10 or 20 more by the summertime. Personal trainers are awesome. They're incredibly expensive. If you're rich, you can get a personal trainer every day. But really what you want a trainer for is to give you a routine, because what I have a problem with is I have a 20-year-old mindset when it comes to exercise, where either I'm just doing like a perfunctory exercise that doesn't really exhaust me, or I'm just like going towards the metal, pedal to the metal exercise, total exhaustion, and I end up injuring myself. And a long time ago in my late 20s, when I was really into all this P90X stuff and CrossFit, I injured my back pretty severely doing weightlifting at a CrossFit thing. And since then, I've never been able to do high-intensity exercise very, very well, but I was never in the habit of doing habitual exercise. So in this environment, a personal trainer can be very, very useful. A dating coach, I don't know. I mean, I never used one. I can't imagine what they would tell you. I always tell people when they want to meet girls is the first thing you have to do is figure out a way to get guy friends and win their respect. That's your first step. If most incels don't have enough guy friends or enough activities that they participate in, and so when they're trying to get a girlfriend, they're overcoming this enormous amount of social awkwardness and lack of confidence that you just don't want to be dealing with when you deal with the fairer sex at all. So you want to develop a relationship with guys to be competent and confident in some other area that's outward facing. And the second thing you want to do is to kind of, learn first how to approach women in a polite but a direct way, and then kind of understand where you can find women who have their priorities reasonably aligned with yours. So I don't know. I dating coach, I'd be a little bit worried because I would imagine if you typed dating coach into a search engine, you'd get a lot of grifters selling you stuff. So, I'd be a little bit careful of that. Okay, Nervan VMaker. Hey man, nice seeing you here. Nervan VMaker for $20 USA. This is a response. I'm kind of actually curious. I'm reasonably aware of who stands on for the super chats versus the actual monologue itself. A Nervan VMaker for $20. Eric, the Once in the Future King is a tragic masterpiece. White is a total leftist, but his analysis of how utopias collapse is completely reactionary. This gives the book the unique quality of having the brain of a reactionary, but the heart of a liberal. Most critique of utopians scoff at the utopian. White weeps for them. And this is one reason why early 20th century British authors are so lovely. And why they're just totally, you see a leftist like Orwell. And always you have these midwits like Professor McManus. And people will describe all of the transgender word games and the subversion of truth that goes on in leftist ID pool as Orwellian. And of course, the midwits of academic leftism, they say, actually, Orwell was a democratic socialist. So he probably would have liked the total subversion of language that went on from the left, because he was a leftist. He was one of our guys. I just want to think to myself, what would Orwell say if I showed him the contemporary left right now? And it's total disregard for truth. It's total, absolute bootlicking worship of power. And it's total disregard for things that are spiritual and moral and true, and that have some substance beyond parasocial cliques and dunking on people in sort of catty ways on Twitter. I mean, people like Orwell and T.H. Eliot and T.H. White, all these THs, and T.H. White, they would have been utterly horrified by this. And so the thing is that the although it's very tempting to see people like Tolstoy and Eliot and White and Orwell, I mean, to a certain extent, and obviously, I mean, another good example would be Hemingway. All of these, you could see them as sort of proto shitlibs, but in a much more real way, they weren't proto shitlibs. They had proto shitlib opinions, but they were actually substantial men that happened to be attached to these proto shitlib opinions. And what's happened is that the corrupt political opinions have preserved, and the manliness and the vigor and the virtue and the ability to interact with real world things, that's degraded. And it's tragic. So that's another way to think about things. If you're reading an old work that has subversive elements in it, you can appreciate the fact that the people who made it were they were true believers in a way that very few modern leftists are true believers. Most modern leftists are ideological grifters. They know that what they're selling isn't real, but they just want to feel smart because they know that they're destined to win in the way that the political environment's set up. But you can also appreciate the fact that the people who produce this stuff were actually real men who had real convictions and would stand by them, up to and including going to war. I mean, for instance, leftists, like the Spanish Civil War was the Ukraine-Russia war of the 30s. And a not insubstantial number of these 1930s progressives actually went to war and fought against Franco. Even though I think the sort of anarchist side of that war was horribly depraved, and they were horrible people, and the only way that Spain wouldn't have experienced literal Pol Pot genocide was Franco. Franco was by far the lesser of the two evils, and I'm convinced that had the communists won, you would have been Holodomor, if not a Pol Pot scenario where they would have literally been shooting people for wearing like glasses and stuff like that. They were raping and murdering priests left, right, and center, and they were just getting started. But true to their convictions, and this is why these people are so admirable, so many leftists of the 1930s actually picked up an arm and fought in Spain. It'll be a cold day in hell before a Vashite goes and fights in the Ukraine war. And, maybe that's a commentary on the state of modern manhood. It almost certainly is a commentary on the state of the modern manhood. But it means that in many ways, the leftists of the early 20th century weren't as leftist as the leftists of the modern day, because a certain amount leftism is fakeness itself. And to the extent that you're a real person, you're a worse leftist. Creeper Weirdo for $3 USA. The most offensive thing about Scott Adams' controversy is that leftists who don't work expecting me to believe that they read Dilbert. Also claiming Adams is as bad as Ren and Stimpy's creator. I don't know anything about was Chuck who created Ren and Stimpy. I'm kind of curious now. Ren and Stimpy. It was created by somebody called John Kricfalushi. I don't know. Well, you've lost me on the Ren and Stimpy reference here. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess I'm sure the leftists are freaking out about Scott Adams' racial comments this week. I haven't really been paying attention to that too much because the cycle is just so predictable and it has the same reactions every single time. You could create an AI chatbot that would create the reactions the left wing has to Scott Adams. It's so predictable, and Scott Adams doesn't really have anything interesting to say about American race relations. This is literally, I think what was it? Was it Dalrymple, or I'm not forgetting. It was Dalrymple? It was Delingpole, right? There was an author that wrote a very similar thing in National Review about how he advises his son to stay away from African Americans because of the high crime rates, that ran in National Review in, what was it, 2012, I think. And it was that article, and he got fired from National Review for writing that. And he was prominently featured in Nick Land's Dark Enlightenment as an example of the insane dialectic that proceeded around race, and how this ultimately prefigured the meltdown of all political dialectics. And all we have with Scott Adams is a rehashing, a rerun of that from 2012. And I remember that controversy so well. I remember exactly how it ended. And nothing new has been said. It's the same stuff over and over again. Even the leftists can't get interested in this stuff. It's so fake. And there are people with entirely fake opinions. Hey, Society Man. Talk about an old friend that I had never met in person, but is as close to an online friend as I have. Purely online friend. Society Man for $25 USA. Have you been paying attention to what Nayib Bukele has been doing in El Salvador? From adopting Bitcoin as a currency, to waiving due process for MS-13 gang members, to iconoclasm of gang symbols, and drawing denazification in Germany as a historical parallel. He seems like the right-wing Caesar for his corner of the world. I think what he's doing is promising, but there's also a danger, right? Because this is the problem with all of these people. The country that has to change is the United States. And anybody who sort of runs out and runs this revolution ahead of the United States is running the risk of receiving the wrath of the State Department. And Viktor Orban is one of these people. Erdogan of Turkey is another one of these people. You could say Bashar al-Assad in Syria is also one of these people, although he's a client of Putin's. So he has another great power client right there. These people who are trying to break faith with the progressive vision are playing a very, very dangerous game, especially in Latin America, because first of all, they will be subverted by the State Department, and their objectives will be openly subverted. And then furthermore, to the extent that they cross, so right now, to my knowledge, Bukele, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, all he's done really is jail MS-13 gang members and massively reduce the crime rate, which has been a huge boon for El Salvador, as far as I can tell. And the average El Salvadorian will tell you that. And so right now he's a very defensible character. But he gets a few bad news cycles, or he actually he does something that's nuts. His failure will be used as a bludgeon to be used against the right wing in this country. So when it comes to these people who are trying to sort of front run a change, a reform that necessarily needs to happen in the United States, we have to be very, very careful as dissidents to associate our project with theirs. All we can say is that individual decisions are interesting or good. So the decision to just jail all the gang members, to get the guys off the street and reduce the crime rate, this is an interesting policy, a good policy, something that we could learn from. Bukele is not our guy. He is not somebody that we want to nominate as an example because we can't account for his success because his enemies are way more powerful than him. And to be quite honest, we don't really know what his motivating ideology is at the end of the day. And like January 6th, even if his missteps are, in the grand scheme of things, very, very benign when compared to somebody like Hugo Chavez or Fidel Castro. A great example would be Pinochet, right? Pinochet took over his country in a coup. So did Fidel Castro. They both executed their enemies. But Pinochet was used as a bludgeon against right-wing thinkers for years afterwards, even though, I think he had the Defense Department, the CIA's approval because the CIA back then was kind of quasi right wing. But even though, as many people have pointed out, Pinochet was a much more Chilean figure than his corresponding opponent Allende, who was had all these relatives who were Ivy Leaguers, very prominently Isabel Allende, who was the famous novelist of the magical realism school. I think she was a magical realism author. But we need to be very, very careful of embracing people across the board. What we need to say is this is interesting. This indicates that people are willing to actually take the issue of order seriously. And it's very, very clear that a decrease in crime is the first step to the revivification of an economy. Crime drives economic poverty. Poverty drives crime to a certain extent, but to a much lesser degree. The causal arrows are much more in the opposite direction. Novum, thank you, Society, man. But that's my take. We need to be careful about associating ourselves with people who are trying to kind of jump the gun on this one. Novum for $5 USA. I picked up a classical guitar after playing rock and metal for years. Started learning Bourrée by Bach, one of my favorite classical pieces. My soul hasn't felt this full since playing metal for the first time as a kid. I learned to love again. Yeah, this is something that I've thought a lot about in terms of revivifying the internet. And I'm not in a position where I can do this, even though I really loved folk music in my 20s. I don't have an environment where I can practice music, or really the time. All my time is usually quiet time, and so practicing instruments is very, very difficult. But turning an online space into spaces for concerts, for actual folk music, and to have part of the community building revolve around actually people playing instruments, that's something that the right wing could embrace and claim as our own. I'm thinking here of my friend Anglo Ortho, who's experimenting with this stuff on his channel. I heard, and I didn't have time to check this out. I heard he had a separate channel dedicated to live music, but this is something that I think would be a great avenue to look into for people in our sphere. I'm always reminded of, the bane of my existence, Garrison Keillor, who is simultaneously, I hate him for being a shitlib, but I hate him even more for stealing what I feel would be the ultimate awesome right-wing idea, which is to have a radio style play in modern age, like a literal live performance of a radio style play that embodied American values. And, I saw Prairie Home Companion live several times. I think one with Garrison Keillor, one when another musician who I really like called Chris Thile. People might know him in the bluegrass scene. And I've loved it every single time, even though the politics these people express when the mic is down is horrible. I felt that this embodied the America that I fell in love with, that was alive at one point and you can find almost nowhere else. And that I want to see revivified in microcosm, that I want to kind of hand down to my son. And I saw this in Prairie Home Companion, and I felt like, what if people who really believed in this America put it on? The problem is that in order to have a Prairie Home Companion, you need to have theater kids. And the theater kids are not on our side. They are politically on our enemy's side. And one thing that I really hope, one thing that I'm watching like a hawk coming out of this post-leftism sphere, is I'm hoping and praying that this might be the beginning of a falling away of the theater kids from the progressive center. The leftist narrative is so hollow and so trite. Could there be people? Could there be people who have a creative angle and who have a performance-based angle, who actually want to not only act out the Prairie Home Companion, but in many ways want to act out the Prairie Home Companion to prefigure the recreation of communities that look like what Prairie Home Companion was delivering to. And and I think that would be always something I would want. I always remember in the Prairie Home Companion movie, which I saw, which like the typical shitlib thing it pretends that it is the authentic version of itself. They pretend like the Prairie Home Companion radio show is actually the product of a small town like theater that actually embodies small town values, as opposed to being the product of the public broadcasting corporation being put on and populated by sort of coastal shitlibs. But one of the things that I think was Meryl Streep in that movie, who was one of the performers, she said, all the other radio, all it is just cheap entertainment for 80 people who have low attention spans and machines playing music. And the machines playing music, it always kind of stuck with me, right? Because when I listen to something on the radio, all the disc jockeys, they're playing. I always thought, oh, this is something that's happening now because it's on the airwaves. But back in the old days of radio, there actually would be people playing instruments in live settings in many broadcasts. And so that always struck me as something that you could have a live broadcast that was literally live music being played, and there would be a connection you'd have to that would be more profound and deeper than just hearing a record or a pre-recording. I've always remembered that line from the movie. But yeah, music is being able to play a musical instrument is more meaningful than it really ever has been in the past in a lot of ways. Link for $10. What is the next step after completing the basket weaving project? I have trouble visualizing what comes after having a group of friends that one can discuss one's real opinion with, unless it's simply building a commune in the woods, fully retreating. What is the political end of basket weaving? Well, I mean, I don't want to bring this chart up again, right? Maybe I should. Maybe I can here. I'll just bring this chart up again. Oops. I'll have to minimize this. I mean, this is, I don't know what, look, I'm not the person behind basket weaving. I'm not the person I'm not the person who's I'm not the person who is the person who's in charge of running it. That much more falls to people behind the scenes. I want to talk about the Beowulf thing, but that's still early days. That's not even really created yet. But the idea of basket weaving is to create new institutions. So, first of all, I hope I'm not answering this question, this super chat, but because it's super chat, I'll reiterate this. The first step is to get people together talking because they want to talk about opinions in real life, and they want to forge friendships with people that they are that they have based opinions, or whatever, that have dissident opinions, as I like to say. At some point, you're going to grow this group to the point where you want to segment and specialize. And there'll be people who are like, I'm a private citizen. I want to have these opinions, talk about them, maybe consume podcasts now and again, maybe download the app and vote in a certain direction in local elections where I can actually make a difference. But I'm primarily not a political person. You can create an outdoors group with people who share your opinion, or, a gaming group with people who share your opinion. Just those little things, just having a group of a based gaming group, that'll be such a huge step forward for us. The problem is that we can't get to critical mass. Basket weaving, the purpose of basket weaving is to get to critical mass for actual institutional organization. Because institutions are based on trust relationships, it's very, very hard to get those trust relationships online. They're much, much easier to get on the ground. So eventually the point is to get new institutions. And in addition to doing something like a based outdoors group or a rifle club or a chess club, there's also a possibility for people to run for office, to create organizations for local politics, or to do what the Old Glory Club is doing and to create a more extensive network for organization at the national scale. And that's how you build institutions, because once you have something, the Old Glory Club is literally a 501c3, so it's tax deductible. So this is a place where people can store capital and actually use this to do something that's more important for the future. And who knows what will ultimately come for that, but it's a focal point around which future organization can possibly occur. And which future funding can be directed, also very importantly. So I hope that answers your question, Link, even though I kind of already answered it at the end of my thing. Pragmatic Culture for $10 USA. I left Twitter for Lent, but while I was on, I never saw BAP actually attack trads. You're right that he's characterizing clueless, charismatic type Christians, but I don't know anyone else who calls those type of trads. But I don't know if anyone who calls those types trads or a charismatic that calls himself a trad. It has always seemed to be a straw man. Well, I can think of a few occasions. I've mentioned them on this show. Can't remember if this was BAP or Raw Egg Nationalist, but there was a few weeks ago that Raw Egg Nationalist, I think it was him. I can't remember. Maybe it was BAP. He was talking about how Matt Walsh's assertion that all men want is to have a family and kids is sort of like that's a fundamentally cucked perspective, and that building families isn't going to help us win the culture war. And this is an attack. This is, and you can see in the comments of those tweets all the people piling on with kind of attacks on the trad dad archetype. Sure, is building a family the thing that's going to win like exclusively? No. But building families is how you survive. And I'm pretty sure surviving is a necessary condition, if not sufficient, for winning. So, yeah. And there was this earlier iteration where Bronze Age pervert was going on about how monogamy was a poorly adapted social construct for the modern world, which is kind of, an explicit attack on the trad worldview as well. So, I don't know Pragmatic Culture. I'm not trying to point fingers. Obviously, Bronze Age pervert is, he wrote a good book. He's hugely influential. He came up with an enormous number of tropes that help us describe the present conditions we live under. But I know he has certainly been beating this dead horse, right? Pragmatic Culture, again, for $4 USA. Also great meeting you at my first weave. Looking forward to the next one. Well, yes, certainly. Absolutely. I hopefully will do these once a month. I'm going to be on vacation in March, so I don't know if I'll be doing a East Coast basket weave in March, maybe towards the end of March if it's scheduled. But the next weave I'm going to be doing will be on the West Coast. I think I might be doing one or two of them. But yes, definitely look forward to seeing more Pragmatic Culture. I try to think of people in terms of their real name. Unfortunately, when I know someone really well online, it's hard for me not to get past their online handle. It doesn't hurt that I was an engineer in school, and of course, names never came to me naturally of people. Dreadnought for $10 USA. Read, the betrayal of Christian leaders. I really just can't understand why these leaders behave this way. It's not like they're going to get more congregants or the world's approval by selling out. It's almost like they get some sort of high from destroying and betraying tradition. Just why? Okay, this is a good question. So, this is also, and I really want to I'm not going to name names here, but there are people who are fighting the good fight, trying to bring the right-wing point across on Twitter against people who are kind of betraying or being weak in the face of progressive pressures to adhere to successor ideology. This is a very delicate situation for a lot of reasons, because there's two ways this goes, right? Maybe three. There's three ways this goes. The first way this goes, and the first reason why Christian leaders are betraying people who are trying to resist the modern world, is the ultimate worst reason. And this is true to a large degree. The worst reason, I think a lot of the German bishops are like this. They're just plain corrupt. They have connections to progressives and progressive government leaders in particular. They want to maintain these relationships and facilitate them, and they want to get invited to all the right parties, or even worse, right? They're keeping people's secrets. These people are keeping secrets of their own sexual impropriety, and they want to essentially betray their congregation, because they want to deliver a sucker punch to the most conservative areas of their church, because they're afraid that the most conservative areas of their church are going to betray them, or going to expose them, I should say, not betray them. They're going to be exposed as being grifters. They're going to be exposed as being people who are not living within the sexual obligations of their own church. They're going to be exposed as being phony believers, or being fakes themselves, because if you're a fake, the last thing you want is the authentic article coming into the room next to you, right? And if you have somebody, like some of these German bishops who are literally preaching heresy, these people, if they have people who are devout worshipers right next to them, it's immediately apparent to everyone in the group that they're fakes, or worse, their improprieties that other people might know about might fall into starker relief. That's the worst case scenario. The middle case scenario for the cuck out, or the betrayal, is the fact that they're stuck in the boomer truth regime. The boomer truth regime is aware that there are progressive elements of the church, and they feel, oh my God, there's if we just have one more thing, if we just have one more, these people, the middle case people, and this is what makes this situation so complicated, right? The middle case people, they're 100% devout, they keep to all the moral principles, and they are not themselves heretics in their heart. But they've absorbed the boomer truth regime talking point that if we just gave in one more time to progressive demands, then we'd be whole as a church, and the schism in our congregation would be healed. And so they're lobbying for the progressive, they're lobbying for the progressive change as well. So this is where I want people to pay attention in this, because I have listed two categories and there's a third one, right? So at this point, if you're a young guy in your 20s and you're Orthodox and you're trying to keep your congregation adherent to the actual teachings of Christianity and not just going along with the latest political fad, you're thinking to yourself, well, screw that middle case. How clueless do you have to be to not understand that you can't just go along with the spirit of the age, and they need to have they need to get sense knocked into them, and I'm going to be attack them on Twitter or social media because I think they need to have a wake up call, a crude awakening, and if I have to be a frog poster to achieve that, so be it. Okay, great. But then there's this third category of people. Now, the third category of people, they're 100% Orthodox. They're out of the boomer truth regime, right? But meaning that they understand that concessions to the progressive worldview, nothing's ever going to satisfy the progressives. They understand that nothing will ever satisfy the progressives. But they see the category 2 people, the Orthodox people that are in the boomer truth regime, and they know that they have to, in order for their congregation to survive, they need them to be on board. Furthermore, because that second group of people is getting viciously attacked online by online trads who are anonymous and could be just shit posters, they feel very, very defensive. Their emotions, if they could bare their souls to, they would be saying something like, look, guys, I'm trying to hold this church together. I'm trying to keep us orthodox. But in order for this community not to fracture into 20 different pieces, I need to keep all the Rod Drehers and David Frenches. I need to keep them satisfied just long enough to ride out this storm. And when you and now I have like these young upstarts that have converted 2 years ago and have no idea what it is to manage an actual parish come on and embarrass me, an Orthodox believer for 20 years who's raised a family of 5 kids, and now I'm being called a heretic by this 25-year-old new convert. Like, screw those guys. And so they sign on to the progressive worldview because the coalition has been schismed in their they've basically been they've been given a situation where they're encouraged to take the left-wing side. It's like that whole situation we had with the COVID amnesty thing that was going on a few months ago. The COVID amnesty, the purpose of the COVID amnesty articles was not to actually give amnesty to the actual medical establishment. Biden was president. He could have pardoned all of them. They didn't need amnesty. They didn't need to ask conservatives for forgiveness. The purpose of the COVID amnesty articles, in my opinion, was to get the moderates online by triggering an overreaction from conservatives. By having all the conservatives say, "Oh, there's no amnesty for the people who are wrong about COVID. We're going to, charge them with treason against, crimes against humanity and treason against the United States and blah, 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 blah." And they see that and they go, "Oh my God, there's an army of angry right-wingers. I better shut up and not go against the orthodoxy. I better not question the possible consequences or side effects of certain medications we've been distributing, because otherwise I'll be on the chopping block. I'll be fired. I'll be victimized by this angry right-wing mob." And this is why, we're in this difficult position. We're trying to preserve these churches, not tear them asunder. And so the problem is that what you really need is you need to get into the room with these Orthodox believers. And you need to explain to them why they need to take certain perspectives in writing and their public statements, so as to preserve their church and how that is the best perspective going forward. As an online poster, there's the possibility that you're doing more harm than good by creating a situation where even the Orthodox believers believe they're being actively disrespected. And so this is a problem, and this is what causes the betrayal of Christian leaders. We need to have in real life relationships with the peoples who are making these decisions. If you want to ask me what the purpose of basket weaving is, right? Look, priests get church leaders get an enormous amount of pressure from their progressive allies in power to kind of betray the orthodoxy and to go along with the spirit of the age. A lot of them are doing their best to hold the line. It would do so much if you could just have dinner with your priest. If every month you could sit your priest, or maybe bishop's a little bit of aiming high, but maybe if you had a large enough organization, if you could take a church leader out to dinner with 3 or 4 young guys and discuss church issues, and then have him hear your concerns about orthodoxy and what other young guys are saying, that would measurably increase the resiliency that churches have to the corrosive influence of politics. I think it would do a lot more than using social media to try to wage these conflicts in a political arena. But that's my opinion, because the point of waging these battles is to save the institution, not to cut it in two. And political fights are axe fights, not scalpel fights. And you're trying to do surgery. Kevin Pullenum for $5 USA. So true about theory. Recently, I've been listening to a Catholic podcast, Philosophy for People, for anyone interested. And while it's fun to go schizophrenic, while it's fun to go schizophrenic on understanding Thomas Aquinas, my weekly's men group meetings, just talking and praying, is way better. Absolutely, positively the case. Thomas Aquinas was right. Theory at the end of the day, for human beings, it's just straw. A God doesn't need it to be God. And very few human beings really need theory to come to correct action. What they need is proper action and proper community and proper spiritual orientation to come to proper, spiritual development and moral development. So it's very, very true. Batman Bad for $3 Canadian. I don't personally see any sign of victory ever when Western oligarchs never face any kind of punishment for their actions. Well, Batman Bad, I can't see this. We can talk about whether Western oligarchs deserve punishment. I certainly believe they deserve some kind of punishment, legally, Susan. But Batman Bad, you can't enforce punishments on these people in power. And there's very few worse things you can do than threatening somebody in power with a punishment you cannot enforce. I'll say that again. There's obviously a time and a place for anything, but I can't think of a single situation where threatening a person in power with a punishment that you can't possibly hope to enforce is a good political move. I think what we have here is a confusion of cause and effect. Punishment will be the necessary effect of any kind of political victory, but threatening that consequence takes you further away from it. We need a certain number of the present leadership of the West to be on board with a radical restructuring of how decisions are made and how the West organizes itself. Until we cross that Rubicon, we have a huge, huge problem ahead of us. And we have to pursue alternative avenues that are not traditionally political before we're able to do that, which is a major part of institution building, which is a major part of in real life basket weaving, and so on and so forth. Ben White for $5 USA. I have a hard time finding fellowship outside of explicitly religious groups. Is that bad? Also, how do I get into already established groups? A lot of these groups have established relationships and social hierarchies, and it can seem intimidating. Well, I mean, one thing you could do is if you're in a religious community, it sounded like, Ben White, you're a frequent super chatter, so I have a reasonable idea of what your disposition is. It sounds like you have a religious community with some number of young people in it. Find out what they're interested in and then do the activities with them, right? Even in traditional communities, people have hobbies, a lot of outdoor hobbyists, sometimes even some nerdy hobbyists. I once met a priest that liked Magic the Gathering, right? And doing that hobby with them is a great, breaking into an established group when you already have somebody who does that thing is a huge, it's a huge leg up. There's this, I read this thing about I can't remember what, I used to be into all these sort of like life hack blogs. And one of the life hack blogs had an article about how to work a room. And they said that oftentimes the best way to work a room is to come up with, to sort of set yourself up to, he said one of the mistakes is to look for people who aren't talking to anybody yet. And that's oftentimes a mistake. He said oftentimes the way you can work a room and meet new people is you look for the pairs of people or the groups of three. And you come in and you kind of listen to what people are saying and you pose questions. Or you try to get involved in that group, and then usually most of the time they'll let you in. And because of the fact that it's a group of three or a group of two, there's going to be there's going to be a greater chance that they're actually involved in the community itself, or that they'll actively try to recruit you into that community itself. But going with one other person is always helpful, and also knowing how to kind of work a room is also helpful as well, Ben White. So that's my advice. Batman Bad for $3 Canadian says, it lately feels that the left won absolutely, to me at least, or am I missing something? Well, I mean, it certainly is that the left has won politically. I mean, it won politically a few years ago. What's happened in the last few months are that people are really, really, really burnt out on politics. This, I think, is actually a good thing. Now, I could be wrong about this, but I mean, there's two possibilities. The first thing is that we all get burnt out on politics. Everyone burns out forever, and we never do anything else to organize. I think that is a very, very low likelihood. I think that people like me will always be trying to organize in real life, because the purpose of me doing this isn't politics. To go back to my original statement for this talk, the reason we're doing politics is because we love things that are outside of ourselves, that aren't political, that aren't clout. So even if everyone burns out on politics, even if I lose all of my subscribers tomorrow and people decide that they want to watch Vosh or Destiny instead, I still will be doing things like basket weaving and trying to build community, and maybe even making video essays, because I care about the ideas and I care about meeting people and spreading the ideas and building bonds of spiritual trust with new people. That's the reason why I do this. And because of that, I think that the possibility that everyone totally despairs and the whole community of the right just burns out instantaneously, I think that's an outside possibility, given that I think we've pretty much burnt off most of the people who can be burnt off, who aren't totally committed to this path at the same way that I am. The much, much more likely possibility, though, is that this era of doldrums, which could last, unfortunately, for an uncomfortably long time, is the prefiguration to a change in political perspective, where people come back to politics saying things like, "Okay, I don't care about political theory anymore. I just want to have meaning back in my life. I just want to have community back in my life. I just want to have it make sense. I just want to have something to believe in again, and I want to have beauty return and something that I can actually look back on and feel proud of. I just want to have a family. I just want to have a church, and I want to fight for my people. I want to know who my people are." And so what could happen is that people burn off the politics of pro-felicity because they're no longer fun. Chaos burns out. And when chaos burns out, their new seeds have room to grow. New seeds have room to take root. And we could find in 6 months a whole new crop of people looking for something that's actually real to pursue in politics. And that's what I think, Batman Bad, you might be missing when you despair. Owen Zelensky for $10 USA. I started a job teaching art and drama at a Catholic high school, and it's been a great experience, though I am planning on pursuing teaching further. I am also interested in working as an artist, particularly in this sphere, like Giant Geo. Can you give me any advice on pursuing both? Well, first of all, at the risk of sounding self-serving, I would advise you to look into basket weaving and meeting new people in this community in real life. I don't exactly know what Geo of Giant Art Productions deal is when it comes to promoting his own art. I do know that Passage Press promotes physical artists, promotes fine artists in their spaces, and so there might be a way. And Curtis Yarvin is also really interested in artists as well. So what I would do is I would look at the new journals that are coming out of the Dime Square scene, the sort of new post-leftist art scene that those people like Lomez and the rest of the sort of neo-reaction crowd are involved in. I look at what Geo is doing. He has the podcast he does with the Traditionalist is very much focused on politics, and I'm not really aware of what Geo does when it comes to art, but that's also a promising sphere as well. And what I would look to do is I would also look to kind of make people in your Catholic community aware of the fact that there's this group of young people that's producing edgy content. Not all of it's in line with Catholic social teachings. Not all of it's in line with Catholic sexual teachings on the family. But nevertheless, it's looking for new spirituality, and that you are kind of you're in that group hoping to kind of bear witness to why Catholicism is the right answer. So what you're trying to do, Owen, is you're trying to kind of break down the difference between the new art scene on the avant-garde and your role as a Catholic artist in a school, and just guessing on what your disposition is right now. Occupy occupy a niche as a bridge between those two worlds. Nothing excites students more than to hear that there's something cool happening in an urban area, in an underground avant-garde scene in high school that really lights up their imaginations, right? And this is something that could be a big utility for both communities. You have to keep them separate to a certain extent, because obviously parochial education and avant-garde can't. This is like, peas. You need to keep these peas and carrots separate. Obviously, there's a certain way in which those worlds cannot possibly intersect. But there are always doors and passageways from one to the other, with responsible gatekeepers ready to let the right ones in at the right moment, and to make sure that the two communities don't destroy each other. And it sounds like your work might be an ideal fit to occupy that position at this time. So I would say, subscribe to sort of the avant-garde projects, see what's going on there, and then make people who are in the Catholic community who are hungering for something new and something exciting aware of that. And I would say that that's a great opportunity. You might want to think of it in that regard. The rabbit hole for $3. 2030 to 2040 micronovae pole shift 12K year cyclical cataclysm. All societal norms will return. Be somewhere you and your family can survive without power, utilities, and don't get flooded out. So, rabbit hole for $3 USA. I think you're predicting catastrophe in 2030. Fair enough. It sounds like something is coming on the horizon in 2030. So it would be good to have all your ducks in a row by then. What I always say, though, is you don't want to put your family on hold because the end of the world might be coming. You also don't want to preemptively flee because you don't know where the catastrophe will originate. What you do want to do always is be building a network, because building a network will allow you to flee when the time comes. And you always want to be building a robust place for yourself to live in the event that you have to hunker down in a location and wait things out. So thank you very much for that warning, rabbit hole. Things are kind of falling apart, but the problem with predictions of catastrophe always is timing is everything. And no one knows the time or the date but God himself. And because of that, organizing practically for a disaster is always very difficult, except for the purpose of networking. And that's largely because networking has utility both if disaster happens and if disaster does not happen. So it's kind of the perfect middle ground solution, in my opinion. Cynical Skeptic for $5 USA. I've been thinking, and I wonder if I have thought about it yourself. What if everything you and everyone else on the distant right are doing is wrong? That the problem is way bigger than we think, which might be the reason why all of us are so ineffective. Well, okay, Cynical Skeptic, but how do we respond to this? What if the problem is bigger than we think? What if we can't do anything about this politically? We still want to survive as people, right? We still want to survive as families. We still want to survive as faith communities. We still want to preserve our tradition going forward. So we'll have to organize. politically, if only for the purpose of surviving these hard times and coming out on the other end. The way you're describing it, cynical skeptic, we can't change the course of our civilization. We're destined to hit an indefinite mini dark age. That's still a political problem that needs to be organized around. And we still need to wield some amount of political process to facilitate that organization of new communities that are insulated from that. So my reaction to this is the same as my reaction to the last super chat. You still need networks, you still need practical politics, and you still need to believe in good ideas. As I said in a recent Substack essay, the purpose of politics in the present era is not to come up with some special slam dunk on the progressives. It's not to come up with some hypothetically best philosophy that the right wing could have in theory for all time in some of a Volian sense. The purpose of politics in the present era is to come up with the right psychological attitudes that you can bring to keep yourself sane in a political environment that is rapidly changing beyond anything that our parents or grandparents really thought was possible in their lifetimes. And so, for that reason, I think that the politics I preach is very much useful both in the scenario where we can do something in our lifetimes and in scenarios where we can't do anything in our lifetimes. Lake $10 USA. I've been of the opinion that the internet should be limited to libraries. Internet use should be very intentional, not just browsing. Also, thoughts on the idea of banning or limiting anonymity online. I think we should be online so little that having your name online does not matter. Well, the problem is that we need online anonymity to organize internationally and nationally. There's no way around it right now, Lake. So unfortunately, online, in a perfect world, in the world you described, where internet's only in libraries, you would not need online anonymity at all, because you'd live in a high-trust society. But in the world we are right now, where everything is hyper-politicized and people are being canceled for thinking about ideas and organizing, we need online anonymity to link together local communities into something that is more cohesive at a national or international level, and that does not fire on itself, most importantly. And so I don't think there's any way around anonymity. Now, that being said, let's say I was to create some kind of based Amish community that had internet access by itself, right? I probably would say you would want some kind of like limited intranet in houses that connected to emergency numbers and other people in the community for purposes of convenience and direct peer-to-peer connection, right? So maybe Urbit on sort of like a city-style LAN network, right? And then you would want to have connections to the World Wide Web or archives in particular places like libraries, such that the draw of parasocial communities would be incredibly, incredibly limited, except when it was engaged with in a very, very intentional way. That's, of course, for an ideal society. This would be useless for us right now because without the ability to organize from our homes, we have no ability to create a network that could survive an attack from the establishment whatsoever. And we need to be able to use the technology as it exists right now. And anonymity is the technology we need to use. Creeper Weirdo for $20 USA. Family media has fallen off in a big way. It's mostly kidults nesting in nostalgia and propaganda. I think our perspective is needed here because when I saw children's films can be darker, and when your movie sucks says kids' films can be darker, I don't think we mean the same thing. Him being a gay atheist movie nerd. Yeah, you probably don't mean the same thing. I mean, if you gave a kid's film about biblically, like the Old Testament, it would be way, way, way darker than most kids' entertainment in the present era. And yet it would certainly not be what your movie sucks thinks kids' films should be. a lot of people have brought this up to me, and this is there's sort of a hole in our current entertainment environment, and no one's filling it. I think Peachy Keenan, who's associated with the Claremont Institute, has been working on a project to fill this. But there is a huge demand for family entertainment that is dissident in perspective. Most people who have families, first of all, as is being seen right now, conservatives in the millennial generation have way more families than progressives do. Progressives basically don't have kids anymore, or strongly progressive people don't really have kids. It's very, very rare. And so an enormous amount of the family market is conservative, or not progressive, as I should say more accurately. But furthermore, what we are not saying right now is this trend is likely going to continue. The people who have families or who create families are likely going to either find their way into right-wing, conservative, or post-leftist circles, after which they will be in the market for things that break rank with the establishment's perspective on things, the establishment propaganda. And so there will be imminently, I believe, a huge market for kids and family-related entertainment that is kind of based, to borrow a crude term. Now, I have no doubt that Ben Shapiro and the Daily Wire feel that they can capitalize, monopolize on this market. I think that we should beat them to this. I heard the Passage Press is opening up a sphere for young adult fiction, and that is a hugely promising avenue. I think that the Passage Press's brand might be hurt if they did family fiction. But it's not immediately clear that that's the case. Maybe they could do some separate publication for that. But what you brought up here, Creeper Weirdo, this is a huge opening right now. The market hasn't yet opened up, but everyone knows that making non-progressive family entertainment is going to be a huge market in the future, and there needs to be people who are able to fill that. So, maybe you could join a community or find a community of people who are interested in doing something that's along those lines. Sam153, evening, Dave. I will save your voice. I will save your voice tonight with a short appreciation. Cheers. Well, thanks, man. As you know, I'm always getting to your chat at the end when I'm trying to speed through these things. So thank you very much. Okay, Asteroidal Assassin for $5 USA. I'm not too familiar with the Christian sects as a Muslim. Tell me, why do you prefer Catholicism and consider the true form of monotheism over Protestantism? Well, it's a little simple. I believe that the gospel are accurate historical records of Christ's testament, and I don't believe that the Quran or the Book of Mormon are. I actually have a very growing respect for Muslims. I think they are allies in all senses of the words at this stage. And we need Christians and Muslims need to be working together in this environment as fellow peoples of faith. But, obviously as a Muslim, you don't believe the Gospels are accurate. And, I think that there are some problems with the Quran and the Book of Mormon. So using the Gospel as my basis for religious faith, I believe that that Christ's testament, Christ's words, are communicated through the apostolic succession of Saint Peter. So I'm an apostolic Christian first. Now, in that realm, I also believe that in the realm of apostolic Christianity, I believe that the Church of Rome has the best claim to be the successor of St. Peter. And for that reason, I am a Catholic. I also believe that the prominence or the succession of St. Peter is confirmed by the holiness of multiple saints that I found in my own reading of European history. And so for that reason, I find myself as a Catholic. The reason why I am not a Protestant is I also don't believe in sola scriptura, but the reason why I am Catholic is I believe that Christ's intention was to create a church the gospel and the scriptures are the support of that church. In many ways, they are a foundation of that church. But the first foundation was St. Peter. And because of that, the apostolic succession is what it means to be Christian in a proper sense. Even though I believe Protestants are Christians, I believe they are misguided in this assumption that the text itself can be a church. I guess true to my nature as a reactionary, I believe that the text cannot be interpreted outside of some interpreter, which I believe to be the Holy Spirit. And I believe that the Holy Spirit must occupy some church that draws its line from St. Peter. The current successor, in my opinion, is the Church of Rome. And that's why I'm a Catholic, in sort of technical terms. So thank you very much. Okay, the rabbit hole for $3 USA. So I also see a message from my friend the Traditionalist saying that I shouldn't forget that I Am 1776 is also starting an arts foundation here too for family-oriented books. I forgot to mention that one as well. So I guess a new competitor has entered the ring. Since they seem to be the first off the line for this family stuff, even ahead of the Daily Wire, and they have been open to publishing friends in the past, I think that if you are an artist looking for something that's family friendly, this might be a prime point to contact the people at I Am 1776, especially since they've been so good at encouraging and discovering new talent from people who would otherwise be online anonymous people. So thank you very much for that. That's a very good call. I missed that one. Rabbit hole for $3 USA. I appreciate your response. Ben Davison of Suspicious Observer's YouTube channel breaks down the science of what's coming. This isn't religion, it's science. Religion understood this natural cycle. Well, I mean, I do believe in cyclical history, rabbit hole, but it's not science. I'm a little bit of a stickler on this front. Cyclical history, I believe, is factually based in history. But historical propositions cannot be properly scientific because they cannot be scientifically tested. I also don't believe that evolution, strictly speaking, is science either. I mean, I do think that natural selection is a good theory for the emergence of species, and I am something of a theistic Darwinian. I'm not Darwinian. That sounds weird, but I do believe it. Natural selection is a good explanation of the origin of species, but evolution is a historical theory and therefore cannot be science. Science, in my mind, is only propositions that can be tested, or statistical propositions where predictions can be made and tested against future observations. Only that is science and nothing else. Though I very much agree the idea of cyclical history is attested to with our understanding of deep ancient history. And we're foolish to think that the cyclical history is dropped off in any way that's reasonable or meaningful. Creeper Weirdo for $5 USA. If you're looking for cool channels, two are Leather Apron Club and Pilgrim's Pass. LAC put out videos, Leather Apron Club put out videos that are well thought out and seem like they wouldn't be allowed on YouTube. Pilgrim has a video on why sci-fi is deeply religious. It's incredibly based. Well, thank you, Creeper Weirdo. I will recommend those channels. I think I've seen Leather Apron Club. I don't think I've seen Pilgrim's Pass. Is it Pilgrim's Passage? But that sounds like a good channel as well. The rabbit hole again for $3 USA. I don't believe in blackpilling. That's depression or quitting our souls are eternal. This materium means little. Be positive and see those around you. Stay strong, everyone, and Godspeed. Well, thank you, and that's a very, very good message for the evening. And last super chat of the night, Owen Zelensky again for $10. One more. Thank you for your advice, Dave. I was not aware that the Passage Prize featured visual artists. Yeah, it does. It was part of their original Passage Prize, had a visual art component to it. I think Lomez is looking to expand that, although very likely there'll be a separate venue for visual art stuff. Do you think webcomics could go on Substack? That also is quite fitting that OAFK was mentioned, as was the play my as the play my students. OAFK was mentioned. As the play my students are performing this weekend, Once and Future King. As the play my students are performing this weekend is King Arthur by Dale Alquist. Wish us luck in the play. Oh yes, thank you very much. I mean, I would kill for a theater company locally that would be open to performing sort of productions that had weird reactionary messages. I've always wanted to do a stage play, right? Like a stage play as something that I could do, because I think that would be easier for me to write than to write an actual novel. But that sounds awesome, and I hope you reach out to those people and find some connections there. It's King Arthur is very, very based. Dale Alquist, he's a big Catholic guy in the old community there. He's a Chestertonian. Dreadnought for $3 USA. Ironically, the beautiful simplicity of the system of natural selection was one of the things that helped bring me back to God and away from the new atheists. Yeah, I think that that theistic evolution is sort of, I think people scoff at it because they see it as a middle path, but I don't think there's anything necessarily offensive about it. And I think that we need to have evolutionary theory as a tool, as a lens that we can see the world through, even if you are a strict creationist. You need to be able to understand the idea of Darwinian processes and how they play out. So thank you very much, Dreadnought. I'm trying to get to the end of these things, but people keep on super chatting. Okay, now finally the last one. Rabbit Hole for $3 USA. The galactic current sheet interacts with our solar system. 1859 caroling event. The sun has increased activity, and our poles are shifting now based on the data we are looking at 2030 to 2040. Well, I mean, 2030 is, a lot of people for some reason believe that this is a turning point, and I don't know. The thing is that statistical ideas about the movements of large historical periods, we don't have the measurement quality to make this at all scientific. So this is, I respect this prediction. We should take it seriously. But this is an intuitive prophecy. It is not a scientific one. So people need to be aware of that, and they need to walk into it with both eyes open. And Dreadnought's giving me a bad time. I'm reaching for my book of Psalms. And Dreadnought says, there shall be no end, Dave. Mwahahaha. Okay, well, very good, Dreadnought. But I have gotten to the end here. And so now I'm going to read Psalm 4 as my psalm for the night. I think Psalm 3 was last time. I'm just going to go sequentially through the book this time. Psalm 4. When I call, answer me, O God of justice. From anguish you released me. Have mercy and hear me. O men, how long will your hearts be closed? Will you love what is futile and seek what is false? It is the Lord who grants favors to those who he loves. The Lord hears me whenever I call him. Fear him and do not sin. Ponder on your bed and be still. Make justice your sacrifice and trust in the Lord. What can bring us happiness, many say. Lift up the light of your face to us, O Lord. You have put into my heart a greater joy than they have from abundance of corn and new wine. I will lie down in peace, and sleep comes at once. For you alone, Lord, make me dwell in safety. All right, guys, thank you very much for this great live stream. I know that this was a drier topic than usual, at least for the first part. I thought that the super chats was very useful. By the way, guys, I'm going to show this every time after the psalm. Consider joining a basket weaving, get involved in real life, focus on your spiritual health, especially if you're Christian during this time of Lent. And if you have any questions about any of the following, if you have suggestions, feel free to DM me on Twitter or on Telegram. I hope to hear from you with suggestions. And in the meantime, I'll see you probably next week for another live stream, although I might schedule a interview during that time. But either way, I'll see you in perhaps about a week, and have a very blessed week of Lent. God bless and good evening.